propagation and direct use. So a different set of evaluator will be evaluating different applications. So there may be changes in the membership. And then we also have public participation. We'll be discussing that a bit more on later. So the results of the assessment and the results of the public participation will serve as basis for our director whether he will issue a biosafety permit or not to the application. I would also like to note that since we are evaluating GM plants in a case-by-case basis, there are certain applications that would need further evaluation by specific experts, such as those with expertise with entomology with IR traits, GM plants with IR traits. And sometimes when the application is for propagation, we have to also involve a SEC expert or a socio-economic, cultural, and ethical expert. Okay, so I've mentioned this already, but I would also like to note that the circular provides for the agencies to tap an external expert should we need further assistance on the technicalities of an application. So we often do the assessment in online form. So it has been the practice since the pandemic, and it's much easier compared to setting a schedule physically, since we have 9 members of the JAG. So it's much easier for us to conduct the assessment online. And in the Philippines, way back 2016, we have this law we call Ease of Doing Business Law. And for this law, all of our government transaction and services should be streamlined. And as a result of this, the processing for GM application was also shortened. So before it took around, I think, 80 working days. But now, under this new circular, JDC1, series of 2021, the prescribed timeline is 35 to 40 working days, which is actually hard for us as well to meet, but we have to work around it. So what we do is we do not count the processing time when since during the assessment there may be cases wherein the assessors would require more information to the applicant. So when we give them the questions and during the time until they provide the answer, that is not counted. Okay, so we have 3 days of pre-assessment, 32 days of simultaneous conduct of JAG assessment and public consultation, and the BPI director, upon receiving the results of the assessment and the public participation, would have 5 days to decide whether to give the permit or not. This is the Biotechnology Office website, so I hope you can see it. These are all the services that we provide. So these first 3 are for the biosafety permit issuance. So if you would click that, it will direct you to a PDF file showing a flowchart of the step-by-step procedures. We also have here the post-approval monitoring activities that we conduct if you are interested, as well as the GM detection procedure and other services that the office offers. So when we have new regulation, we ensure that the public is very much involved, even in the crafting of the regulation. So we have public consultations. And even during the implementation of this JDC #1 series of 2021, it was implemented last March 2022. So immediately after that, we conducted public briefing for several segments of stakeholders. We invited researchers, faculty from different state college and universities, LGU or people who work in the government and other departments, students and other groups that will be interested or that needs to hear about the new regulation. So during that time, it was the pandemic, so we conducted it via Zoom. Currently, this is the number of approvals that we have for GM crops. We have 4 for field trial, all single events. We have commercial propagation, 11 events. So those, and 8 events, 8 stacked events. So those are for corn, For cotton, we also have rice and the eggplant. And then we have direct use. For direct use, we have 64 single events and 47 stacked events with a total of 134 approvals. So this is actually available as well in our website. So we have the approval registry. So there's a list of events that will be listed there. And we update it as soon as we have issued another permit, we update it. So the last update was on April 4, 2025. So this serves as reference not only for regulators, but also for importers or for those who are wanting to import GM plants. This is also the reference of one of our offices under the Bureau of Plant Industry, the National Plant Quarantine Industry, since we don't allow unapproved events in the country. So before they apply, because they are the ones issuing the permit, they have to ensure that the declared event is approved and listed in our registry. Also, we have this in the website. So every application, there is an upload or an entry. So the application form will be there, the trait, who is the technology developer, the public information sheet. So this contains the summary of the technology or the GM plant. And we would also note there if it is open still for public comment, when was it applied, when was it approved, and we also upload the biosafety permit and the decision document. So the information is available. Okay, so this is a sample of the decision document. So this is uploaded once there is a permit already. So this captures the summary of the basis of the approval. So similarly with, I think, Malaysia, this is not only available in our website, but we also upload it with the website of BCH, the Biosafety Clearinghouse, as well as the FAO GM food platforms. Okay, so this is the sample of the permit that we are issuing. So this one is specifically for commercial propagation, and this is issued for BT cotton. So as you can see, the first page here contains the specific information regarding the GM product, the product developer, and when it was issued. But the back page would contain the permit conditions, and this permit condition would be different depending on the type of permit. So it would be different for field trial, it would be different for direct use, and it would be different for commercial propagation. And in some cases, there would be a different entries depending on the type of application, since we evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. So the permit, once issued for commercial propagation and direct use, it is perpetual. So unless revoked, it is valid. But for field trial, again, they only have 2 years to conduct the study. This is signed by the technology developers, and as regulators are the ones to ensure that they stick or they follow the permit condition. Otherwise, we have grounds to revoke the permit. So this is one of the activities that we conduct during the post-approval. So this is for BT cotton. We conduct insect resistance monitoring. So we just did this around, I think, March this year. So we monitor if there's a development of insect resistance management, and we check 100 pre-tag cotton plants in a zigzag sampling pattern and observe if there are presence of the target pests or the cotton bollworm, other arthropods, plant diseases, and weeds. Gene testing was also performed to confirm the expression of the BT protein in the monitored plants. So aside from corn, we also conduct this, of course, with BT corn. But I'd like just to show this because this is relatively a new approval compared with corn. Okay, so for local GMO-related innovations, so these are, the ones that I will be sharing with you are those that applied already to us, but there are also, outside of these, there are several developments or research and developments ongoing. So of course, we have here the golden rice or the GR2E, which expresses vitamin A. and BT eggplant or EE1 eggplant, which has the BT proteins for its target pest. However, as we know, this is currently on hold because of the writ of kalikasan case. So the Philippines, the regulators of the Philippines have submitted a petition regarding the decision of the Court of Appeals to a higher court, the Supreme Court, and we are yet awaiting their decision on this matter. So we are hoping for the best, but also anticipating the worst case scenario. And then recently, this high iron, high zinc rice, they will be also filing an application for commercial propagation this year. So the grains are fortified with higher presence of iron and zinc. So yeah, it's nutritionally enhanced. We also have, of course, the BT cotton. So this really is a big thing for us since during the early 2000s, the cotton industry really dropped. So we're hoping that this would help those that are involved in the cotton industry. Okay, for public engagement and public awareness. So our office is very much active in local and international engagements. So we serve as resource person to share knowledge and experiences that can help local groups understand policies and guidelines for GM and gene-edited plants. So for this one, there are events like where it is a focus discussion group like this one. We were invited, our boss is invited to speak for nutritionists and dietitians. So our aim whenever we're invited is for the public to clearly know the regulations that we are implementing and hopefully clarify whatever misconceptions that they have. And then there are also consultations like this that that involve several stakeholder groups. Like we were joined by groups from the media, from the scientists, from the farmers. And in the Philippines, we have what we call the National Biotechnology Week. So it's a week-long celebration, usually conducted during November. So we also speak for that event last year to explain the regulations. And of course, we have also international engagement just like this to serve as resource person, to share our insight. But we are also really drawing lessons from you and from other countries on the best practices to employ and the lessons learned from other countries to support the development of our guidelines and our regulations as well. So here are the recent, the APSA training just last July here in Malaysia as well. Policy and precision policy and workshop, genome editing workshop for crop improvement, ASEAN Seed Congress, and of course the COP meeting. Okay. So we also ensure, as mentioned during the overview of the processing, that public participation is part of the application process. So since direct use and commercial propagation permits when issued, this will the GM event will be used throughout the country. So we ensure that the public participation for those applications are also nationwide. So this is what we call the public information sheet. It contains a summary of what the GM is, the GM plant is. So we require that to be posted in the BPI website, in our office website, and the applicant's website. And aside from that, it should be published in one newspaper of general circulation. So a public commenting period of 15 working days is required. And then for field trial, we focus the public participation in the site that we have approved. So they have a public hearing. They are inviting everyone. Even if your stand is against GM, you can come and raise questions to the technology developer and to the regulators. I'd like to also share this. This is a study on public perception. It was conducted last 2022 during the pandemic and was published last May 2023. A precedent study was conducted in 2006, and this is actually available online. So they interviewed around 1,180 respondents from 10 provinces of the Philippines. 9 stakeholder groups, so those are businessmen, traders, consumers, extension workers, farmer leaders and community leaders, journalists, policymakers, religious leaders, scientists, and students. So these are the common misconceptions according to the study. Genes are being misconstrued as present only in GM foods, human genes being modified by mere eating of GM foods, and plant viruses are transferred once you eat fruits that are infected with it. Conclusions of the studies were that Filipino stakeholders generally support biotech in crop production but are less certain about its use in animals. Scientists are the most trusted sources but are not accessible, so people often rely on social media despite low trust. Stakeholders need clearer understanding on the concepts of genes and viruses. Scientists and media journalists are the most supportive group when it comes to biotech. And key concerns are the safety, of course, the health of crop biotech, and morality for animal biotech. After 16 years, perception has improved in the usefulness, quality, and understanding of biotech information, trust in the regulation, and willingness to join the biotech activity, and focus on food and medicine benefits in decision-making. So these are the recommendations of the studies as well. So they recommended to tap scientists as a source of information, improve public knowledge on genes and viruses, expand the level of optimism of other key stakeholders, and make biotech reporting more balanced. Since, like in the movies, it's very projected in a negative way. Enlighten stakeholders more on animal biotech, and nurture students as core of biotech advocates. Maximize the role of national mass media in public information and education, and establish a trustworthy social media platform manned by a credible source. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Darlene Joy Siena from the Bureau of Plant Industry, Department of Agriculture, Philippines. I can see all the questions forming already, so hold it for now as we will have a Q&A session after this. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for us to introduce our next speaker, an eminent plant biotechnologist. He has more than a decade of experience leading international transgenic crop programs at ICI Seeds and Zeneca Plant Sciences, went on to serve as professor of plant biotechnology at the University of Reading from 1996 to 2023, specializing in plant breeding, gene expression, and protein evolution. And for over 21 years, he has advised the UK government on biosafety, and he currently serves as the chair of DEFRA's Advisory Committee for Releases to the Environment, also known as 𝐒𝐭𝐫𝐞𝐧𝐠𝐭, and has been a key contributor to the development of implementation of the UK Precision Breeding Act. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for Professor Jim Dunwell.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be back in Malaysia. I used to visit here quite regularly when I had an oil palm project that I was working with in your rival in Indonesia, but I haven't been back in this country for a long time, but it's a pleasure to be here and to talk about something which is clearly close to my heart and has been for the last 30 or 40 years, from the times when there were no such things as genetically modified plants. Because we should remember that the first GM plant was produced in 1983, so we're 42 years on from that D-Day, so it's not a new technology. What I'm going to talk about will have some common themes that you've heard about today, but also we'll have a slightly different slant on it, looking at this occupation and this type of science from a European perspective with a strong UK perspective. And the UK and Europe are not the same thing, as you'll learn as we go along today. In fact, they're quite different organisms and quite different populations. So we'll have a mixture of science and where science meets politics and where politics meets the law. And that sometimes leads to quite difficult, complicated relationships. So the beginning, I've got my address down there as the University of Reading. I'm also, as was said, I have been chair of the advisory committee that advises the UK government on this subject for quite a number of years, and that's led to a deep involvement in the new changes in legislation that I'll discuss in a bit more detail. In the UK, we have two main government agencies responsible. The responsibilities are split slightly differently to some other countries. We have for cultivation, and that's the growing of crops. We have the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, abbreviated to DEFRA. When it comes to food, we have a separate agency. It's not part of government directly, whereas the Department of the Environment is part of government. The Food Standards Agency, or the FSA, is a separate arm's-length agency. And between them, they regulate experimental field trials, commercial field trials, although, as I have to point out, there are no commercial field trials at present within the UK, and we've never grown commercial GM crops. That may change in terms of gene-edited crops in the future, as I'll explain. It does, though, particularly FSA regulates the importation of GM products for food and feed, and also associated with that is labeling. An important difference, perhaps, with some other countries is that the government themselves is not responsible for making all these decisions. They depend very much on two important advisory committees, 𝐒𝐭𝐫𝐞𝐧𝐠𝐭 that I chair, which has a legal authority, and for novel foods and processes that advises on different types of novel foods, including GM foods, and that's run as an advisory committee as part of FSA. I said that the EU and the UK are different in many ways, although for some time we were considered to be part of, politically, part of the EU. The difficulty in terms of legislation and regulation goes back more than 20 years to how the EU determined their definition of GM in terms of crops. And they determined in 2001 that genetically modified organisms, and the definition is down there, but there were various techniques involving that, and it included recombinant nucleic acids, direct introduction of one part of an organism into another, but techniques that were not considered to result in GM, and the third one there answers a question that was raised this morning. Polyploidy was excluded for the last 20 years as being a non-GM organism, as a non-GM technique. The critical bit is the annex, and the annex to this piece of EU legislation, part 2, and the critical word, and I know it's legalese, but mutagenesis was excluded from the definition of being genetic modification. And that was because mutation breeding was considered to be an old-fashioned, traditional method that dated back into the 1950s in particular, when irradiated crops were very fashionable, considered to be very high-tech and all the rage, and also quite safe. Remembering that that was mutagenesis, mostly conducted by irradiation, that was non-targeted, non-specific, and changed many parts of the organism, many parts of the organism's genome. That word mutagenesis then is the core to what I'm going to say for the next few minutes. Okay, so how do we administer all of that? Everything I say is available online. I've got plenty of the URLs that you can link to when you've got want something to read later today. All the applications, decisions, and notifications are available online as part of the government website. The most recent crop application, this is for GM wheat for experimental purposes, was issued earlier this year to the University of Oxford, who have a genetically modified wheat project, amongst many other organisms. When it comes to GM food, again, there's a list on site on the Food Standards Agency, the food.gov.uk. This is a long list of all the genetically modified organisms for food and feed. And there are very many of these. And they date back for several years, because remembering that the first GM field test was conducted in the UK back in the early 1990s. This is a summary of the 280 regulated Food Standards Agency reports. And this is in reverse chronological order. So there's 280 of these for food and feed ingredients, some for food and some just for feed. And the latest example of that is one from Ketiga for a GM maize variety, and it gives all the definitions. It gives how the GM event was detected and all the links into the modification and regulatory process. Talking about the European process for food, and this is something which is still ongoing. we might have diverged from the EU in some ways, but in terms of food standards and GM food, then we're still covered by those EU regulations. And for those of you who are interested, coming up quite soon is a European Food Safety Authority webinar on their attempts and their latest ideas on scientific opinion on protein safety assessment, and that's online on the 6th of September. Something for your diaries if you're a foodie person. And what they're going to talk about is their publication from earlier this year on the assessment of newly expressed proteins in GM plants. And it was published in the EFSA journal, and there's a paragraph describing the different bullet points on that, again, that you can read at your own leisure. The question we were asked, and other people have addressed, is how is all of this enforced within the UK? We have a separate, completely independent subset of scientists who work for the Animal and Plant Health Agency. So this is a third, but different agency from the first two I've addressed. The inspectorate, the GM so-called inspectorate, they inspect deliberate sites, they enforce the legislation, they investigate breaches of the legislation, and they set up their own diagnostic in-house laboratory tools so that they're completely independent from the other branches of government and, of course, from any local commercial interest. Okay, part two, which is local GMO-related innovation, and a couple of graphics from showing the sort of retrospective trajectories of GM. And this is a North Atlantic difference rather than an EU, US, although it amounts to the same thing. You'll see up to the late 1990s that the trajectories of GM field trials were approximately the same in the USA and in Europe. Something then happened, and you can see the dramatic drop-off in Europe. That was a political decision taken by politicians who preferred not to make any decisions while they were still in office. And so they introduced, as politicians sometimes do, a so-called temporary embargo in any further permissions. And it had this effect, that whereas in 1995, already by 95, the UK had 37 GM field trials, and the EU had 213. When we look forward just a few years, the USA, the numbers were about the same. The UK had fallen from 37 to 1, and the EU had fallen from 213 to 25. And that was partly due to the political response to public opposition. Many of the UK trials were destroyed, including ones at ICI, where there was a trial of low-lignin eucalyptus trees that was cut down. There was a trial of GM apple trees that was destroyed. There were trials of GM oilseed rape that were destroyed. And it was really quite an intense period at the end of the 1990s in the face of that concerted opposition. And so the European politicians took a long time to come back. And in Europe as well, trials were destroyed in France and Germany and elsewhere. There was a fierce level of opposition. However, despite that, there was a GM product that came to market in the UK, and this is the quite famous genetically modified tomato puree that had a low level of PG. And it was sold through 2 supermarket chains. I still got some rusty cans in my filing cabinet from those days. I've taken all the tomato out because that was starting to sort of ferment and explode, but I still have the cans because they're quite museum pieces now. They were fully labeled. You might not be able to see from there, but it says produced from genetically modified tomatoes. It was imported material from the US. It was sold in supermarkets initially with completely neutral points of sale information describing the truth about GM. And that lasted from 96 to 99, and then gradually the supermarkets became nervous. They withdrew it and it never came back again. So it's the one and only GM purified processed food that was on the market, but it's going back nearly 30 years now. If you're looking at the present day situation, then it's something different. If you want to find GM products in England or in the UK, then you have to look for products that are imported from the US. Most of them are candies and snacks and cakes and other sickly things with lots and lots of sugar in. And lots of that sugar, you can see here they're labeled as highlighted. That sugar comes from genetically modified sugar beet. The soy lecithin comes from GM soya, and some of the corn also produces dextrose. So that's fully labeled. It has to be according to the EU legislation. But you won't find any fresh GM products because they don't exist. It's only purified imports now from the US. If we're looking at UK-only science, then one of the things, and there are a series of examples, and I've got to kind of limit the time that I can devote to each of these. One of the best known that, again, won't be commercialized directly in the UK, but has been commercialized in the US, but was produced in the UK at the John Innes Institute by Kathy Martin, was a genetically modified tomato where a flowering plant transcription factor is introduced to increase drastically the levels of anthocyanins to turn it from a red tomato to a deep purple tomato. And the details of that were published earlier this year in the ACS Food Journal, and there's a YouTube video that you can look at which describes how that was produced. That's likely to be first available, so it is available in the US in certain states. It's likely also to be the source of highly nutritious purple tomato juice. Other UK organisations include the well-known Rothamsted Research, and they've been doing GM work, field trial work, for many, many years. It's likely that their first product that goes commercial, again, will be in the US. So although it's produced in the UK, they've licensed Yield 10 Bioscience to produce omega-3 products in camelina, and that was announced last year. And they've had camelina GM trials for many, many years. They've also now produced camelina that can produce astaxanthin, another food colouring agency. So to skip back to my first question, the point of the political divergence and the political debate for many, many years is this one, which is gene editing, is it a form of GM or a form of mutagenesis? Because remembering that editing a gene is changing part of the gene, and all organisms, whether it's humans or plants, are mutating all the time. So a field of wheat or a field of rice, every plant in it will be genetically distinct. Very slightly, but it will be genetically distinct because of a background rate of mutation that is occurring all the time. So if gene editing, minor changes in DNA sequence, are equivalent to mutagenesis, then the scientific logic at the time was thought to mean that gene editing, therefore, is not a genetically modified form of introduction, and therefore the EU GM legislation should not apply to gene editing because they're directly analogous to mutagenesis. So this question went to the highest court in Europe in 2016. And the diagnosis or the verdict was, the initial verdict was produced in 2018 that said, yes, gene editing is a form of mutagenesis. However, when the final verdict came out 2 years later, the judges had changed their mind. And they said, and you can read all of this and I'm not going to read it out, but they made a somewhat strange distinction between old-fashioned random mutagenesis introduced through radiation that changed different parts of the genome, nobody knows where, that was okay and was traditional and therefore not GM. But gene editing, when applied to precise fragments of a few genes or one gene, was GM because it was new. And that sort of led to the sort of scientific upheaval in the science and industrial community in Europe, which had a severe effect on investment decisions and also the sort of the feelings of scientists involved. I think I'll go straight on to the follow-up. This happened, remember, when we, well, not me personally, But the voting population of the UK decided narrowly that they politically didn't want to be Europeans. They wanted to go their own way. And we went our own way, and that led to a political decision by the incoming Conservative Party that they would take this opportunity to say, right, now we're free of the Europeans, we can change our legislation in this particular area, and that we can go our own way, and we can say gene editing is not GM. And it took 2 or 3 years for that to come about, but that's what happened. So 2 years ago, the UK passed the Genetic Technology, in brackets, Precision Breeding Act. It took quite a long time, but the interesting thing was that there was no political change to that during its passage through Parliament. It was not amended at all. There was a complete, for once anyway, a complete agreement between the political parties. This is what we should do. And the law was changed without very much debate. And that's where we are now. You can read about it on the government website. So what are its key features? The Act removes so-called precision-bred plants and animals, because the only slight debate was about should animals be included, but they were included at that time, but they should not be considered any longer as a GMO. And this Act introduces notification systems, the precisions of various other secondary legislation. It was 2003. This is only going to be brought into force by secondary legislation, which again has now been passed. So this will come into force for the first time in November this year. The context and guiding principles and the scientific basis for making this decision is that the product is more relevant than the process, and that the genomes of single crops are so variable that it makes no scientific logic to say that changes in DNA sequence in 1 or 2 genes has any impact on the type or potential risk of growing that plant. Just in parenthesis, it's worth noting that the number of new genomes from new species of crops that are being produced increases rapidly. And amongst the most recent is a study of several hundred tomato species that says the number of genes in those particular varieties of tomato can vary by several thousand. So even within one crop that we know and like, the number of genes can vary by hundreds or thousands. They're all tomatoes. They've evolved during the cultivation of tomato varieties. They have no impact on whether it's possible to eat them or not and enjoy them, nor on the risk that they pose. And so it's those overriding principles that genomes are remarkably varied. The more we study them, the more varied they are. Just talking of one tropical fruit, you might know the difference between flat peaches and round peaches. That was a mutation discovered in China by random about 1,000 years ago. And flat peaches were the favorite of the emperor of China at the time. It's now recently been discovered that that difference between flat and round is due to a huge inversion on one of the arms of one of the chromosomes that interferes with a gene that controls fruit shape. So it's a massive genetic change in some way that produces a phenotype that's attractive, was never legislated, has no impact clearly on the benefit of eating the flat or a round peach. But it's that background genetic knowledge which is driving our view that there is so much variation that changing 1 or 2 bits of a plant's genome should not be considered any potential risk. So the precision breeding system says it's a plant or animal produced by modern biotechnology where the end product could have been developed using traditional breeding. It's a very broad definition. It's not meant to be prescriptive. It's meant to be something that will stand the test of time and doesn't have to be revisited every time a different bit of genomic information is investigated. So what's happening in the UK? The Sainsbury lab in Norwich are using these sorts of techniques now to investigate and to develop, and we've heard about blight-resistant potatoes. There's many ways of doing it. This is a gene-edited version of tuber infected on the left, the gene-edited version on the right. We've got tomatoes, again from John Innes, published last year, with a new route to massively increase the vitamin D composition of tomatoes by a simple change in some of the cholesterol metabolism that's present. Another Norwich company, which again is linked to something that might be of greatest interest to the audience here, is Tropic Biosciences, who use a combination of gene editing induced gene silencing. They have proprietary GIGS technology. From the Philippines, we've heard the speaker there, cleared last year some of their gene-edited bananas that were non-browning to reduce food waste. And so they're concentrating on that type of work. So it's investigations and science that's done in the UK, but of application much more broadly. Again, moving on to something that hasn't received any mention so far today, and that's something that's really, really important, and the fact that for many people, farm animals are more important than crops. They're certainly more valuable pound by pound, and one of the most interesting and possibly financially important examples is this gene editing, which has been done partly through work in Scotland at the Roslin Institute in the UK, and a US company. And the US Food and Drugs Administration have approved in May this year pigs that have been gene edited to reduce the site to which the viruses bind. This is an objective that's worth several $1 billion a year in removing that threat from the pig industry throughout the world. And I just got something in my inbox this morning when I woke up to say that a further improvement has been made in the US for this material. So these PRRS-resistant pigs are likely to be one of the most commercially important gene-edited animal that's coming to market. How does that affect food? Because that might affect the GM growth of crops or animals. But food is still under the umbrella of the European community, and therefore the Food Standards Agency will have to adapt their own terms, and they're already underway. I mentioned the Act went through in 2003. Government changed from Conservative to Labour, and the Labour politicians are noticeably more nervous about animals than the Conservatives were. And so they, in the latest subsidiary legislation, didn't include animals in the legislative programme. And that's led again to some dismay amongst the animal community, particularly in light of what I've just said about pigs. So that was a notice from last year. What's happening on the ground before all this secondary legislation comes into place is that the UK did change the law so that people who want to do field trials but not commercialise gene-edited material that falls under this qualifying higher plants definition can self-certify, and they will send in information to DEFRA to say, we're doing a field trial, we think it's a gene-edited organism, therefore we're telling you it's being planted. And so far in the last year and a half, 22 applications have been received for non-commercial field trials, including the latest one that came in and was submitted in April of this year. It's a project to cis-regulate a gene involved in the vegetative phase of growth in bread wheat. And you can read all of this for each of the applications. So these are very short abstracts, but you can go online and read all 22 of those if you're interested. What's also happening is an attempt to broaden out this small-scale field trial work to broader semi-commercial, but only for experimental purposes, not for commercialization. And there are two groups set up under the DEFRA Farming Innovation Network who have given £2.2 million to a group called Probity, which is, stands for the Platform for to Rate Organizations Bred for Improved Trait and Yield. It's very much a contrived acronym, but anyway. They're going to grow on large scale a wheat with superior baking quality and processing quality, so these are the low acrylamide, a barley that makes high lipid, high energy forage in order to lower livestock methane production, which is a global warming target, and a wheat with bigger grain size. So all of that will be growing over the next 2 or 3 years. As I said, just to summarize, the UK regulations for crops for commercialization and for marketing will come into force in November. And as part of that process, the 𝐒𝐭𝐫𝐞𝐧𝐠𝐭 committee that I'm chair of, they will have to provide confirmation that they'll then pass forward to the Secretary of State, the minister, the politician who has to sign all of this off. So he's the person. We give the recommendation, hopefully, and they always have done in the past. They'll agree with our scientific opinion, and they'll issue the legal document. Elsewhere in Europe, just briefly, there are a number of these networks that you can investigate if you're interested in a more European perspective. There's EU SAGE, which is a sustainable agricultural gene editing network, and they have all their database available online. Thank you. There's a regulation tracker that you probably know about. You can click online, country by country, that gives you the regulations to do with gene editing. And the third section for the last few minutes is the public engagement awareness theme. This started, at least in the UK, and I was involved briefly over 30 years ago. And a lot of the information from those days is just as valid today as it was then. The first ones of these so-called surveys, consensus conferences, were run in the UK before the tomato puree was introduced. And they were all published at the time. They're historic documents now, but they still have an element of interesting and truth about them. Partly that they say that you should be quite cautious about claiming that there's a knowledge deficit when you're talking to people. That what was learnt from those discussions was that the more scientists tried to explain their point of view, the more nervous the public opinion became, on the basis that, why are you telling us all this unless there's something that you're nervous about yourself? So my view is, please don't sort of start by saying, we're all scientists and we want to explain, because that's the very worst approach. Start by listening to what the other people think and then explain what you're doing. But don't start with, this is my fantastic, fancy project, because you'll antagonize a large majority of the population. You might encourage a few, but you'll discourage more than you encourage. So since those 30 years have passed, there have been very large numbers of other surveys. I can't go into all of them, I won't go into. There was one that the FSA did that again is available online. There's one here that is the latest one that comes from a food standards agency. It's a sort of public outreach, Food and You Too, which is a statistical survey that they do. And this was the most recent that came out in March of this year, which was the awareness and knowledge. And still, lots of people haven't heard about it. You can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing. But if somebody doesn't know, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. A lot of the middle ground of the population don't know because they're not interested. And the more you talk about plants have got genes, and this is a hybrid, and this is where all your food comes from, they don't want to know the scientific background of their food. They just want good food as cheaply as possible. So start with that in mind. Don't do this. This is another survey in the UK, which is an example of the kind of lazy journalism that permeates this whole policy, that says, if you stick a syringe into a tomato, that represents a genetically modified tomato. If, like me, you're dead scared of needles, that's the response you're going to get. It makes people scared. And it's a sloppy and kind of lazy approach to journalism. But you'll still see it there as a representation of what people do. They stick genes into perfectly harmless vegetables with a needle, and often it's full of red stuff as well. So the conclusions, although some GM products like camelina are still being developed, the emphasis, and I think it's important we all say this, in both crops and in animals, don't forget the animal bit, is now on gene editing. It doesn't mean you don't have to do GM, but most investment, most commercial development, and most long-term interest is in gene editing, where you're tweaking little bits of existing DNA, not in adding in whole new bits of DNA. All these things that I've discussed, they're all available online. I'm happy to take questions now or later, or catch me in the restaurant or something. But anyway, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Jim Dunwell. Professor, if you could stay on stage as we are ready to have the Q&A session. And for that, I would also like to invite Ms. Darlene Joyciana from the Philippines, and they will be answering any questions that you might have. But this time, we only have 15 minutes to take your questions. So it's very limited time-wise. Please approach the microphone, state your name and your affiliations and who to ask to. And of course, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome once again Yang Berbahagia, Datuk Dr. Ching Tu Kim, Secretary General of NRES. Thank you, Berbahagia Datuk, for joining us. You come at the right time, Datuk. This is the fiery session. All right, so if you can have the first question. Yes, we already have a gentleman waiting. Please, sir.
My name is Juan. I'm from IBX. I'd like to ask the Professor Emeritus. You probably know, Prof, that recently, I think in the last few years, the Japanese have approved 2 CRISPR-edited fish for their market for food, and a third one is on the way. The question I'd like to ask is, after a few years, once the Japanese population probably have got it figured out that there's no adverse reactions, do you think in a decade or so this could point in the direction for animal GMOs to be safe, and that gene editing is the safe way to go?
I think it's important that we're all quite clear when we're saying GMOs and gene editing. If it goes ahead and we are convinced, and scientifically I think most people are convinced, that the majority of forms of gene editing are not GMOs, I think, and clearly, as you say, and I didn't mention fish because I was talking really about farm animals, there's going to be a history of safe use, as you imply, and I think the longer experience people have, that's why the first of example in any of these cases, and it's why the PRRS pigs are going to represent a real major breakthrough. If they get to the market and people can see that they're saving large and large amounts of money, they're saving the slaughter of thousands, if not millions, of pigs around the world every year, then ethically, financially, and commercially, those are going to be successful arguments to say it is a safe and successful technology, and we should absorb it into agriculture as we absorbed hybrid maize in the 1950s and 1930s. It's the next logical advance where we're applying the best science. It's thoughtful, it's been done thoroughly, but I think it's up to all of us to use our own intellects to improve the sort of general well-being and agricultural well-being of the world.
All right, thank you, Professor. We have another question from our one of our attendees. Ma'am?
Thank you. Yasmin, Academy Science. Looking at how the CRISPR legislation is going to be approved, does that mean that the UK is moving from a process-based regulation to a more product-based regulation? And do you think this is the way that we should look at genetic modification in the future?
Okay, good question. It's a debate that's been around for a long time. Logically, it's what we eat and what we grow that's the important thing when it comes to any safety description. It's less important how we get there. But that's not a view that everybody takes because they might have their own ethical views about process. But scientifically, we are what we eat, and what we eat is the product. The process is the means of getting there. I think if the UK legislation is successful, and who knows, it's been talked up, and I've been enthusiastic about it, but as we say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and what happens commercially. We don't know until November how many, if any, applications we're going to get, how successful they will be, how widespread the sales of those products might be, because until the EU changes their own legislation, we can't easily export that into the rest of Europe. So there's a very small market in the UK, and what I didn't mention, but I don't want to cover it up, the fact that the legislation itself is geographically restricted. The UK is 4 countries. The Welsh and the Scots prefer to be more European. The Irish have to be more European because of the terms of the post-Brexit negotiations, which leaves England. So it's a big change for a small country, but it might have impacts, and it might show other countries elsewhere in the world a route that other people might be able to follow.
All right. Do we have another question from our attendees? Yes.
Hi, I'm Sarani. I'm a PhD candidate. Okay, this question is for Prof. I just want to ask, since now UK has moved from EU, so as we know, EU has a very high emphasis on precautionary principle, and they assume, and there's also assumption that, precautionary principle means prevention. And since now UK have their own legislation, how do you view this precautionary principle? Do you think it's a good thing or it's a barrier? What's your perspective on precautionary principle?
Okay, thanks very much. It's a debate that's, as you know, it has been around for a long time. Precaution is something that everybody can agree to because it sounds good. But sometimes precaution means paralysis because you don't do something because you're just afraid of doing anything. And so I think the basis of the discussions we have is that you need to be cautious, but you need to do it with some sense of balance. And therefore, it's not something that should stop progress. So things have to be proportionate. So it's proportionate precaution, I think, is the slogan.
All right. Do you have another question? Yes.
Hafni from GMAT Malaysia. My question is to Ms. Darling. In the context of Asians, do you think there should be regional harmonizations in order to avoid a fragmented in terms of biosafety approaches? I know that we have, there are several platforms like EPSA and many others, but in terms of the harmonization, I think it's the capability and capacity is really at the surface level. Maybe, can I have your comments on that?
Okay, thank you for that question, sir. So actually, harmonization of regulation is very much talked about, yes, in the Southeast Asia region specifically. But I think my personal take on this, as mentioned by Singapore earlier as well, is that each country has its own basis for decision. So there are certain aspects of our regulations that are specifically curated because of the needs of each country. However, I think harmonization is maybe too much of I don't know if it's too much of a term, but maybe there's some form of alignment would be better, especially when it comes to gene-edited products, because based from our sharings with other countries, there are different technical determination on the type or if a certain product is GM or non-GM. So there are countries considering that SDN2 are GMOs while others are not. So I think on that case, especially its implication on trade, it would be better to have a somewhat of an alignment without losing the sense of individuality as well when it comes to the needs of each country. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have room for 2 or 3 more questions. Yes.
Hi, my name is Mohimin. I'm from Malaysian Vaccine and Pharmaceuticals Tanjung Berhad. So my question is, today I see a lot of presentations are all about GM crops and plants. So I would like to know what are the policies of your countries in terms of LMO, living modified organism, viruses and microorganisms. Is it allowed to do as research and then for field trials and lastly for commercial use?
You want to go?
So I'll go ahead first. So in the Philippines, currently the existing regulation is only for GM plant and plant animals. So LMOs and GMOs are used interchangeably. For microbes, you have mentioned, and some forms of microorganisms, I think they can go through the contained use experiment under the Department of Science and Technology through their approval. But for the for the direct use and other biosafety permits, we don't have any regulations yet for those organisms.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that. The same case in the UK, that the Precision Breeding Act is restricted to plants and animals, and there's even a definition an argument about the definition of plants and animals that some people like to go into, but I won't go there at the moment. But microorganisms were specifically excluded. There is work going on, but as it was said, a lot of the work on microbes is, by definition, contained use. And I haven't talked about the contained use legislation because that's a different bit of government completely under the Health and Safety Executive. So if it was going to go into the field, then it would come back through DEFRA, but it wouldn't be under the aegis of the Precision Breeding Act at the moment. There's interest, but most of it is for contained use interest.
All right, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Ms. Darlene. One final question. Yes, the gentleman in blue.
My name is Tam Chun Hong from Malaysia Grain Corn Producer Associations. This question is dedicated for Professor Jim Danwell. I like that word. I'm very concerned about a good food and a cheap food because I'm an ordinary person. So putting aside, as a professor, you have mentioned that the political aspect, personally, do you actually support the growth of this GM foods in this industry? As a professor so familiar with the Asian countries, what's your foreseeing for the next 5 to 10 years for the GMs crops to be widely grown or the progress in Asian countries? What's your suggestions?
Okay, I can give you lots of personal opinions, and one is that precision breeding or gene editing is something that is more versatile and easier to control. Not only, I've talked about tweaking or modifying the existing genes, but you can also target inserts to particular locations. So you can do things that are a combination of gene editing with an introduction of a gene from elsewhere. So I think that's why the emphasis has moved into that, from randomly introducing genes that you then have to find out where they are, and you have to find out whether there's one or lots of them. Whereas you can use the knowledge of the genome, and that's what's driven the gene editing area, is the exquisite detail that we now know. I mentioned we know hundreds of tomatoes, we know commercial companies have got thousands of maize genomes, and every crop will have hundreds and hundreds of genomes available. Many in the public domain, but clearly many of them are not. And so you'd have to go and target the company if you want to have that discussion. But I think, and I'm not going to preach to anybody, but there's so many important tropical crops. I've mentioned that I used to do some work on on oil palm. More recently, I've been working on cacao, or the source of chocolate. And that's something which, again, is commercially significant, high value, difficult breeding systems. But what we have learnt from looking at the genomes of different cocoa varieties, and I mentioned this to somebody earlier in the day, that like many crops, particularly vegetatively propagated crops, most cocoa varieties have got many copies of integrated viral sequences in their genomes. So again, it's part of this mosaic question that we shouldn't just assume, as I think 20 years ago, people assumed there was a genome for this crop or for this animal. We now know that evolution has been doing genetic modification for millennia, that all of us, including humans, are full of bits of other organisms' DNA. DNA from viruses, plants have got some DNA from insects, insects have got some DNA from plants. It doesn't change the fact that, you know, we're a human and an oil palm is an oil palm, but they have in them many, many different bits of DNA. And that's the diversity that evolution has shown us, and that we have, as breeders, have exploited unknowingly in many cases. And I think the same thing goes, that the more genomic information we have to strengthen the idea that genomes are plastic, and that genetic engineering or gene editing, in whichever way we do it, is only very minor sense changing an already hugely diverse set of genomes. And the same goes for tropical crops as it is for temperate ones. So I just, you know, I look forward to the future with encouragement.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our two other guest speakers, Professor Jim Dunwell and Ms. Darlene Joy-Sienna. We would like to invite you back to your seats. A bit more Q&A that you can continue over a short coffee break, just 10 minutes for you to go and grab your coffee and come back inside, as we are ready to begin our dialogue session shortly. So please be here at 3:40 p.m. Our Director General of Biosafety will be moderating this session with 3 eminent speakers. So please come back in 10 minutes. We will start at 3:40, and we will go for the short break right now. Thank you.
Department of Chemistry Malaysia, the laboratory of choice since 1909. We are part of you in many ways. The Department of Chemistry Malaysia offers integrated and synergistic scientific services to help protect the well-being of the nation in many fields, from forensic to food, water and environmental safety to industry. Apart from the headquarters in Petaling Jaya, Selangor, Kimia Malaysia has a network of services in almost every state throughout the nation. Upholding justice through the Forensic Science Analysis Center, Narcotics Division, Toxicology Division, Forensic DNA Division, Criminalistic Division, Document Examination Division. Protecting the people and the environment through drinking water, Food and Environmental Safety Analysis Center, which focuses on Food Quality Division, Water Quality Division, Biotechnology Division, Environmental Quality Division. Support the country's trade and industry through Industry and Custom Tariff Analysis Center, which concentrates on Tariff Classification Division, Chemical Safety Division, Halal Analysis Division. The quality of Kimia Malaysia scientific services is guaranteed through the Quality Management and Research Center, supported by 3 other divisions which consists of Service Management Division, Development and Information Technology Division, Chemistry Malaysia Training Center. Driven by dedicated staff, high-tech scientific instruments and modern laboratories, Kimia Malaysia is able to provide the best analytical services for the nation. Kimia Malaysia has always supported the well-being of the country. Our experts are available anywhere, at any time, to aid authorities to investigate the crime scene, analyze evidence whilst being an impartial and independent expert witness in court.
A pioneer in Malaysian forestry research and conservation, adjacent to the Bukit Lagong and Bukit Hari forest reserves in the Kepong municipality. A place for both recreation and relaxation, FRIM encompasses many elements of nature, being home to plants and animals alike, lush with greenery, with the steady lifeblood of a river flowing through. Through its rich history and years of successful administration, FRIM has earned many awards and gazetted as a national heritage in 2015. FRIM has also attained the recognition as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Also serving the people, FRIM offers guided nature walks through its nature trails, helping educate locals and foreigners alike on the flora and fauna that it has to offer and why it needs to be conserved. The pioneer in forest research and conservation, FRIM has initiatives to rehabilitate forests after logging. With 10 research stations around Peninsular Malaysia, FRIM's conservation efforts also extend to limestone caves and mangroves across the country. Also, in support of the government's commitment to offset carbon emissions, FRIM has been working with corporate bodies to conduct tree planting initiatives. The institution also works with local Orang Asli folk to identify non-timber resources such as herbs and medicinal products for commercialization. FRIM is also the keeper of records and documentation, and heavily involved in documenting the flora and fauna in the country. Like in any family, every tree within FRIM is accounted for through inventory, helping measure and monitor the growth of the robust giants within its forest reserve. A close count of the flora and fauna within FRIM is also kept through departments such as the Entomology Lab and Herbarium, so that no species goes undocumented for future generations. FRIM conducts tests like eco-hydrology to maintain harmonious relationships among natural elements. Additionally, it boasts the DNA bank utilized for biotechnology, biodiversity assessment, and the conservation of forest genetic resources. To stay relevant, there is a need for concurrent development in all aspects of FRIM's R&D, both upstream and downstream. A promising area for current R&D is in relation to non-timber attributes of the forest, such as environmental services and carbon sequestration. Through the research gallery, FRIM showcases its R&D, products, and conservation initiatives. The Wood Anatomy Lab at FRIM gathers samples from both foreign and local sources for cataloguing. Moreover, FRIM conducts research and development aimed at enhancing the sustainability of the timber industry. This includes exploring methods to utilize wood shavings for furniture production and developing new technologies to enhance the efficiency of wood curing processes in the industry. FRIM also offers forestry product certification services aimed at helping to ensure the industry meets the specifications and standards required by stakeholders, local consumers, and international markets. FRIM's furniture testing lab guarantees the quality for the furniture produced with a different local wood, running the product through multiple vigorous tests before the product is certified and put out to market. Additionally, tree bark and herbal plants within FRIM are distilled into essential oils, which are used to create health products for the public's benefit. Lastly, FRIM's tissue culture lab plays a vital role in producing superior quality, fast-growing and consistent planting materials for forest rehabilitation and herbal plantations. A place for history, discovery, conservation and education. FRIM.
Asal dengar produk GMO, sikit-sikit, produk tiruan. Produk buatan manusia. Produk penuh dengan bahan kimia. Tetapi tidak ramai yang faham apa itu GMO. Sebelum menuduh melulu, mari kita sama-sama tambah ilmu hari ini. GMO ataupun Genetically Modified Organism merupakan pengubah suaian genetik melalui kaedah bioteknologi moden di mana proses pengasingan gen daripada satu organisma dan memindahkannya kepada organisma lain untuk diubah suai secara genetik, GMO. Contohnya pokok jagung GM. Proses GMO ini berupaya untuk meningkatkan kualiti dan kuantiti hasil pertanian ataupun makanan kita. Sebagai contoh, wujudnya tumbuh-tumbuhan dan buah-buahan yang lebih tahan lasak, tahan rintang serangan serangga perosak, tahan kepada perubahan dan cuaca dan iklim yang melampau serta lebih besar. Contohnya, pokok jagung GM yang rintang terhadap serangan serangga perosak di mana gen dari bakteria Bacillus thuringiensis yang rintang terhadap serangga telah dipindahkan ke dalam DNA pokok jagung. Dengan terhasilnya pokok jagung GM yang tahan rintang serangan serangga telah menyebabkan penggunaan racun serangga perosak lebih berkurang dan ini menjadikan alam sekitar kita lebih terpelihara. Habis tu Nisa, dekat Malaysia ni siapa yang kawal selia untuk proses GMO ni? Di Malaysia, Akta Biokeselamatan 2007 atau Akta 678 merupakan akta yang mengawal selia GMO dan hasilannya. Dan Jabatan Biokeselamatan di bawah Kementerian Sumber Asli dan Kelestarian Alam merupakan agensi yang menguatkuasakan Akta Biokeselamatan 2007 yang dikuatkuasakan pada tahun 2009. Jangan risau, makanan anda takkan jadi raksasa. Ada dapat sesuatu? Tekan butang follow untuk lebih lagi ilmu berkenaan dengan GMO atau komen untuk sebarang pertanyaan.
Rubber, a simple yet powerful material that permeates multiple parts of our daily lives, from the medical industry to maritime, engineering, construction, aviation, and even day-to-day transportation. Rubber seamlessly integrates the world around us. This is the story of one of Malaysia's most prominent global exports and the driving innovation that brings it to life. Indeed, the story of natural rubber in Malaysia is one that runs parallel to the nation's economic growth, paving the way for sustained development and progress. Malaysia possesses a long history of rubber cultivation, one that stretches back 137 years ago, when the first seedlings were introduced. Blessed with vast land and favorable conditions for the growth of rubber, today it is one of the world's largest producers and consumers of rubber. Over the past 2 decades, rubber has also been a significant contributor to the country's economic growth year on year. Through MRB's pioneering vision in excellence, the stage is set for new possibilities within the rubber industry. As the country's premier rubber research institute, MRB is the custodian of the Malaysian rubber industry and boasts a legacy of rubber research excellence since 1925. Within MRB, a solid backbone of support is formed via core subsidiaries that ensure continued progress. The Tun Abdul Razak Research Centre for Scientific Research and Development, and LGM Properties Corporation to handle MRB's property and assets, MRB is also an active participant in the international network, which provides opportunities to strengthen its global expertise and industrial relations with some of the top bodies in Malaysia. MRB is also an active member of ISO TC 45 that takes part in international standardization activities for the benefit of the rubber industry. To continually generate positive impact upon the industry, MRB engages in groundbreaking research activities encompassing the upstream, midstream, and downstream sectors.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite you back to your seats. Kindly make your way back into the ballroom as we are ready to commence the dialogue session. That's also part, what I would say, one of the highlights of today's symposium. So once again, for those of you who are still outside, we would like to invite you back to your seats as we are ready to commence the dialogue session shortly. Thank you. We are starting in 2 minutes, so for our delegates who are still outside, we would like to invite you to make your way back in as the dialogue session is going to start in 2 minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for this session, we will also be broadcasting via FB Live. And now we are ready to commence the dialogue session. With great technology comes great responsibility. Genetically modified food from farm to plate. Firstly, I would like to invite our moderator for this session, Mr. Lorny Ngong, Director General of the Department of Biosafety. Mr. Lorny, if you could kindly make your way to the moderator seat. And joining him, ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished panelists, Dr. Tan Siang Hee, Executive Director of Crop Life Asia. Yang berbahagia, Datuk Dr. Ahmad Parviz Haji Gulam Kadir, Expert Member of the National Biosafety Board, and Dr. Masami Takeuchi, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States, FAO. Without further ado, Mr. Lorny, the stage is yours.
Santes. Right. Thank you, Master Ceremonies. Still alert up until now. Yeah, thank you for that. Right. Yeah, I can see from the floor that Many seats are empty, but then again, that is a challenge. So just have to bear with us for this dialogue session. I'm sure that there's a lot of things that we can be mindful as well as are able to take back as a takeaway later on. But as we move from here, let me introduce our line of speaker here. Right. So before I introduce that, maybe I also go by how best for us to go about for this arrangement of this dialogue session. What we have is that we'll be introducing this list of panels. And after that, each one of them will be given 10 minutes of presentation, starting with the first panels, second panel, and the third panel. No worries. I have their names here. The first one will be Dr. Tan Siang Hee, Executive Director of Crop Life Asia. She has given some of the questions to the speakers in the morning. And to my left or to your right, that will be Dr. Muhammad Favid. He's a Director General of Malaysian Palm Oil. So probably we give round of applause for each one of them later on. Last but not least will be Dr. Masami. I hope I pronounce it correctly, or Masamai. Masamai. All right. Masamai Takeuchi, Food Safety Officer, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. Right. Thank you for coming, this one. So let me open my phone for a short while. Right. So what we do now, as you prepare, Dr. Tan, for presentation, you can get yourself while I'm searching for something here. All right. Okay. Right. Dr. Tan, Crop Life, he has his Bachelor of Science in Plant Pathology from UPM. And after that, he pursued his Master in Genetic Engineering in UPM. And finally, his doctorate, PhD in Molecular Biology, Plants, Virus, Research on that from University of Okayama, Japan. So currently, he also has this exposure of regulating and protecting on crops, intellects, as well as biotechnology in crop Asia. Right. Among others, recognition that he has given, Silver Award from Geneva, International Exhibition and Invention of New Technique and Products in 2005, and US Government Cochrane Fellowship for Biological Research of Case Western. And without further ado, I think I'll pass the mic to you. Okay, thank you. The mic, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Yang Berbahagia DG, thank you very much for a kind invitation. It's nice to be back here in Malaysia to be able to talk to all of you and to meet up with a lot of my old peers that we have yang seperjuangan dalam masa biotechnology sejak 20-30 tahun lalu semasa saya di UPM. But I'm going to, the thematic is very, very important. With responsibility and with innovation comes a lot of issues. So together today, I represent a group of companies that is global provider of technology innovation, especially in the biotech space, in the CRISPR-Cas environment, genome editing, and also pesticide, and also the other digital economy, digital solutions. So every year we invest 18 billion ringgit Malaysia in seeds and biotech, and another 16 billion in crop protection. Only on digital agriculture, we invest about 7 billion euro till 2030. So just to share with you, there's a long pipeline and time needed to bring a technology into the field of market. I'm going to get through you a very quick pace because I have only 10 minutes on what is happening globally, because innovation is a continuum, because human population growth significantly, and we continue to have innovation ready to feed the world. I'm going to bring you through a macro policy, how we look at food security, national security, and of course, every country has sovereign rights to protect its domestic market, but on the macro level, innovation is the key driver to help farmers to produce sufficiently affordable and nutritious food. So look at this, at every point, I think Professor just now also said, at every inflection point is either a single hybrid, double hybrid, genome-edited biotechnology that has support the growth of the, what you call, production. Today, we work in a very vulnerable environment. This is the end stock of major crops in the world, excluding China. You have maize, soybean, rice, and wheat. And every crop is less than the 50% line of, for you to produce a crop. We need 120 days to produce maize. Our stock level is at 28 days of global supply. So with today's climate change, any dramatic change in the environment will disrupt our production, and that will disrupt the global supply chain for whether corn, soy, canola, or rice, or wheat. It's a very vulnerable environment. Last week, you look at Korea, you look at Taiwan, all had typhoon and a massive destruction. So macro level, we are at a very, very vulnerable time if global trade doesn't move. So, greatest misconception organism. We all had a long chat about it today. As I mentioned to you, China will have started field trials of what you call corn with 1.2 million hectares. Now they will move to 40 million hectares in the next 5 years. Indonesia, but also mentioned, they already have biotech corn already. Philippines is celebrating the 23rd year of biotech corn. Vietnam is celebrating his 10th year of biotech corn also. This is not normal in the sense that, not abnormal. Everybody is calculating this is a global platform of different crops that has been cultivated globally. And they have gone through thousands of dossiers, submission and assessment for all countries. And Europe imports 42 million metric tons of soy and maize every year. So EU does eat or does import GMO. So this is a global trade. Whether it's from which country, it's a global chain, and that's why it's important for innovation to be put in different countries for them to be able to produce more and to export based on their commodity and what is their preference or what is their, what you call, environment. And it's a growth economy in many countries. Sharing with you, Brazil, United States, Argentina, Canada, India, everybody picks its different crops to be focused on and to be exporting. And the global modified seeds is about 25 billion for GM seeds. And of course, the new trend will be for genome-edited seeds will come through in the marketplace. And today, just now, our professor from UK, the genome-edited ones, there are more and more crops are being edited. Last week, I think, you were in Korea with us. There are crops that the strawberries and etc. were multiple edited and a single edit and etc. So a lot of things are moving, and I really appreciate today's seminar to give you a perspective of what Dr. Lonnie has saw in real time, what are the edits that has been put in the marketplace also. It's going to grow. And a lot of people think grain corn. Grain corn has many, many uses. And it's not only for a single, you talk about ethanol production, but it goes through a whole series of food, feed, and processing that is important to enable a stable supply chain of ingredients into your processing, into your economy. Very good example, if in the last couple of months or before, after COVID, remember, you all cannot export chicken, the prices is very high. because every 10 cents of corn price increase will translate into multiple increase because it's 3 kilo of corn to convert to 1 kilo of chicken meat. So every 10 cents increase will cost you $1 increase in your chicken meat. That is only for poultry, one single component. Just an example of how global supply chain of animal feed is very, very critical to provide cost stability. And not only that, is the farmers that's on the ground today that relies on innovation to help them grow under very different climatic situation. Even soy. You look at the last part, Asia, Europe, and the world in terms of production of soybean deficit. If you don't have innovation here, and very good example is Indonesia is also one of the critical sector is food security for soybean. It's one of the national mandate dalam masa Pak Jokowi. So it becomes a strategic to you invest in technology and innovation to help close the gap in terms of protecting your national security. Something for you to consider. That's why Asia is a corn negative region and it drives a lot of exportation. I can tell you before my current job, I used to ship about 50 containers every week of corn into Asia because Asia doesn't have the sufficient to take on the Panamax to come in. So there are different demand across Asia, which we can talk a bit later on. But just as a context, so the GM grain world is commodity traded, unlike rice. 4% of rice is only traded, but the rest is very mobile, is traded across the world and supplied to ensure to cover domestic demand. So the grain trade, this is just a statistics. The slides were made available to you. You look at how much Vietnam continued to increase despite local cultivation. Malaysia is stabilized. Philippines, because of self-sustainability, 100% of soybean in Philippines is imported, 100%. The rest, 900,000 hectares of GMO corn is cultivated domestically. Thailand has also moved on with the new genome-edited products that is coming in. So US grain, this again, statistics, I don't want to go on a bit more detail. You can take a look later. Coming back to farmers, this is a statistics that we did on every single dollar you put in to invest in GMO cultivation in local farmer, it gives a $3 increase in revenue or ROI to farmers. And it has supported millions of farmers across Asia, across the world to have a better livelihood and also better productivity to sustain the agriculture pillar. Everybody looks at how do I get my agriculture to be an export commodity, right? Everybody, you look at whether Vietnam today becomes one of the largest durian exporter, becomes one of the largest rice exporter, Indonesia also. So everybody wants to have agriculture as core. But are you providing the technology, the incentive to invest in technology to smallholder farmers? There are 500 over million farmers in Asia, smallholders. What are we doing to help them to have the innovation, to have adaptation of climate change, mitigation? And climate does not wait. Today the question is that, hujan ada, air boleh keluar ke tak boleh keluar? Banjir tak? Do we have irrigation facility apart from technology and drought management and mitigation? So across the GM trade, there's divergent regulation you touched on just now. Is there a harmonization? I don't think harmonization will be easy, but let's have a core sets of regulation. Everybody can submit a core package, and then you can have country-to-country diversion. But we need to have a clear understanding of what is required across ASEAN that will facilitate trade. That will be the basic baseline that all countries can have shared same resources and same expertise to move on. This is one of my last slides already. I have 3 more. We have gone through over 4,000 approved events in 70 countries, and more than 3,500 food feed safety evaluation passed with 0 rejection. What is stopping Malaysia? Even all countries, even Europe continues to approve, to continue to import. Japan continue to update its regulation. The question is why? What do we need to help Malaysia to make the decision to adopt the technology? And the cost of delay, again, it will have different opportunity costs, different technology. But to me, as a researcher here in Malaysia, is we have invested so much money in R&D for biotechnology. And are we getting the Malaysian technology out into the marketplace? How do we make the Malaysian biotechnology industry flourish? And together, again, with Dato', we have worked on all palm, we have worked on many, many crops, but that has not seen the light today. So I think there's an opportunity for us to really improve Malaysian agriculture with different biotechnology, not limited to GMO, but including CRISPR-Cas. So this is my last slide. We need to have a larger context in how do we manage food security, but the challenge remains. We need to ensure that we enable the Malaysian farmers to be able to have new technology to cope for adaptation, climate change mitigation, and also to be able to improve our different crops to target whether it's gene edited for better quality, for better for virus disease resistance, for example, chili, tobacco mosaic virus, or potty virus, etc. There are so many things that Malaysian agriculture can quantum leap with the functional regulatory system put in place. Thank you very much. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Siang, for very concise presentations of how crops can gain benefits to the humankind. Right? So there's a lot. I'm sure there's lines of questions been put forth, but even before that, I think I shall continue with our second panelist. So just reserve with your QA, have some ponders and thorough analyze of this question that you have before we allow for that to be open. Right. So pass to you, Dr. Pavid. And at the same time, I shall read some of his resume as put here, because this one is in Bahasa, so I have to translate it in English.
Oh.
Right, so he has his Bachelor of Science from UKM, Master of Science in Molecular Genetics, also in UKM, and a PhD in Plant Genetic Engineering from UPM. He's a very experienced person. I have 36 years in the field of molecular biology for plant engineering, genetic engineering, as well as biosafety for plant. So there's a lot to cover. And for my good self, I've known him for a few, less than 1 year, but definitely seeing him that I've been informed that he was formerly the chairperson for GMAX, for genetic modified advisory committee to the National Biosafety Board. And with that, now that he is putting a hand as a Director General for the Malaysian palm oil, surely he has a lot to cover about genetically modified with regards to palm oil. So without further ado, I shall pass it to you, Dr. Fadil.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Very good afternoon. Salam Malaysia Madani. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And then thank you so much for inviting, the Secretariat for inviting me. It's good to come back to an event where you start with eating, then you start talking, then you stop for eating, then you start talking, then you start eating, then you start talking. So now we just finished eating, now we start talking. Maybe there's another eating after this talking. But nevertheless, I think, thank you so much, and I'm glad to be here, especially when being at the DG, we're talking more about policy and whatnot. So once in a while talking about GM is quite interesting because it is something that very deep in my heart, and I mean something that I've been involved for many years when I'm much younger than this. So I think basically, we heard a lot about GM technology today. I think from the morning, I think so many presentations you heard, and also from the Tan just now. So of course, I think we start, of course, for oil palm, we have done a lot of work in terms of what we call, you can see, okay, from this molecular breeding is done for many years. Of course, oil palm is not like other crop, within 3-4 months, you will get your plant, paddy, maybe 3-4 months, tomato also. But oil palm, one cycle will take you 7 to 10 years. You plant today, 3 years later, only start producing fruit. So palm breeding is very slow. Of course, then we start moving into genetic and modification. So, of course, that is something I did. In fact, my PhD is on genetic transformation of oil palm. So I first produced the transgenic oil palm in 1997. And that was a long time ago, when I still have enough hair, black hair. But then I think things have moved. We still have our lab. I think there's an exhibition out there, and I have many of my scientists here. We start moving from normal transformation, which is fully regulated. I think earlier when I was the chair of GMAP for 8 years before, most of the time we were just talking about all the normal genetic modification. But now I think since as a board member, we are start approving not only the normal GM using agrobacterium or biolystic, protoplast and whatnot. We're now going into more genome editing, which is more precise, and I think and then there are more and more what we call improvement has been made, and I think the regulation also has been changing. And if you look at the global landscape of the genome-edited crop, we can see there are some countries that are already like no restriction, no regulation. Of course, many countries, including EU, they are all regulating. I think in Malaysia also, we recently announced that we are regulating it with some exemption. And of course, some countries are basically case by case. And if you look in Malaysia, I think recently was announced during, I think, the IBC conference that we are regulating, and at the same time, we only have exemption. If your genome edited is involving SDN1 or SDN2, if it is less than 20 base pair. By today, I think everybody is expert in SDN1, 2, and 3 already. I guess so everybody knows. So this is our situation here in Malaysia. But what's interesting, I think to share the same slide which has been showed by Dr. Tan just now, but in different form. Unfortunately, it's too small for you to see. But you can see we have Myanmar, Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia, our neighbors, already planting and cultivating transgenic oil palm or genetically modified, not oil palm, sorry, crops. There's nothing in Malaysia. But I think this morning we have signed an MOU with the cross-border protection and whatnot. So it's very important. Some of these GMO from our neighboring might be coming to Malaysia. Besides, all the other GMO might be coming from other countries that we are importing. But nevertheless, I think this is it shows that how trans-border movement is something that important. And I think the role of our biosafety, what we call board, is very important, especially with this development. But in Malaysia, as we know, in fact, Dr. Tan was asking also, there's a lot of R&D. We have done a lot, we have done approval and whatnot, but still there's no commercial planting yet. I think from what we can see, that means currently there are 206 million hectares of GM crop planted globally. And I think, of course, the top 5 countries we know, US, Brazil, Argentina, India, and Canada, sorry. And then we can see most of the crop, we can see here, cotton, soybean, potato, maize and corn, same anyway, cotton, carnation, and then canola, alfalfa. And I think if we look here, on the left-hand side, earlier we can see most of the GM crop have been planted in developed countries. Now you can see there are more planted in the developing countries. So this is the changes. And back to Malaysia, currently we only have approved 68 GMO events for FFB, and we have 9 release or trial for GMO event, but there's no cultivation of commercial GM in Malaysia. And I think I'm not going to go into detail, but I think I just want to let you know that this Biosafety Act is very close to myself, because the day the GM or the Biosafety Act was approved by the Parliament is on my birthday. So that's why I will never forget about this thing, because 18 years ago, when I was 18 years younger, the Parliament decided to approve the board. So the act. So that's why I'm very close. Just happened that I also was working more on GM. And also maybe for that, I was also appointed as the first chair of GMAC way back in 2010. But nevertheless, I think I'm not going to detail, but I'm sure Dr. Adi have given a lot of information about how we regulate the GM in Malaysia under the National Biosafety Board, the GMAC, and then the board as well as the IBC. So basically, we regulate both the release, importation, exportation, as well as content use activities in Malaysia. And then back to the approval. So currently there are around 68 different what we call event has been approved for FFP or food, feed and processing, which include mainly corn, cotton, soy, potato, alfalfa and oilseed rape. And in terms of approval for release, there are 9 events, basically 5 involving enzyme and so on. And field trial, there was a field trial in mosquito, potato, papaya, and rubber. I can tell you, when I first became the chair of GMAC, the first hurdle, the first challenge that for us to evaluate is to release the release of GM mosquito by IMR. There's a lot of hurdle. In fact, my first thing, I would say, no way. But eventually, we approve it. But there's a long history about it, but maybe if anyone to ask, we can ask later. But that is our experience, the release of GM mosquito. But that was only up to a trial, unpopulated area, but then eventually it did not take off for some other reason. And then also some release of papaya and rubber, but there's no commercial planting yet. And this is just some photos of the GM release, which I'm sure Dr. Adi have shared in the morning. So there's no commercial planting of GM. And in terms of notification, basically for R&D to do research in the lab currently, I mean, basically we have already approved 410 notification. And I'm sure there's a lot more in the pipeline that have been considered. So out of these 410, it involves all the different like bacteria, plant, animal, human cell, algae, yeast, aquatic, and arthropod. And there are 70 registered IBC or International Biosafety Committee in Malaysia. That means it shows that there are around 70 different organizations are actually involved with GM kind of R&D. And of course, there's also, in terms of capacity building, besides you have the regulatory, you also need to have the supportive requirement in terms of laboratory capacity where, there's a department of chemistry and there are also other facilities that can do testing of GM crop and then using the various technologies and also various what we call technology provider to actually to detect the presence of GM. And of course, there are a lot of samples of soybean and maize has been tested positive, and of course, interestingly, 100% of your animal feed tested positive because a lot of corn and whatnot actually been imported for feed are actually from GM origin. And I just want to switch gear a bit on oil palm, just very quickly, on what we have done. So basically, we have involved in transforming oil palm for many reasons. For increasing or improving the oil quality, and then as well as increasing the carotenoid. When you talk about carotenoid, one thing good about oil palm contains the highest amount of keratin. You don't really need the what we call the golden rice. It's enough to use red palm oil. It covers your requirement of keratin naturally. And of course, we also involved in working on bioplastic, insect as well as pest resistant for GM and oil palms. And what interesting here, you can see why we are working on oil palm, of course, Malaysia is second largest producer and exporter of oil palm palm oil in the world. As a small country, we are basically exporting, or basically 8% of total global oil and crop export are actually from Malaysia. So we can see here oil palm, which basically only covers around 8.6% of the global vegetable oil land, but we are actually producing 36%. So that shows how efficient is the oil palm. So if we can eventually commercialize or come up with GM oil crop, GM oil palm, we can actually produce much higher quantity of the final product. So this is some of our experience at MPOB since we start our GM work more than 30 years ago. So this is just the lab. So we have the capacity for molecular analysis, the modification laboratory, biosafety nursery, as well as biosafety greenhouse. And all our facility has been approved and endorsed by the National Biosafety Board, as well as been inspected regularly by our IBC. So this is some of the example to show our biosafety laboratory and nursery being inspected by IBC as well as the National Biosafety Board. And one of the capacity building that here in Malaysia, because of the requirement, and oil palm is a long-term crop. What we have here, we have on the left-hand side, you can see there's a 10 meter by 30 meter small greenhouse in Bangi, not very far from here, maybe 30, 40 kilometers here from here. And there's another one 300 kilometers from here. There is 100 meter times 120 meters. It's 1.2 hectare greenhouse, 9 meters height, and you have total basically concrete wall. And then you have 1 meter above ground and 1 meter below ground to make sure there's no entrance of insect and, or animal like rodent and whatnot. And I can say maybe that with that size, maybe that's the biggest in Southeast Asia. that currently we are using for testing the GM oil palm. And this also some inspection for the biosafety screen house in our facility in Pahang that I just mentioned. So basically this is in terms of capacity building. That means for oil palm we know it's very important. That's why we have the whole basically requirement, all the facilities for us to do the studies, and also whatever requirement later if we are ready for commercialization, we will have all these requirement ready. Because we cannot just simply release, because oil palm is planted almost everywhere in Malaysia. So we cannot just simply plant it outside because the pollen might pollinate the other non-GM oil palm. And back to our, towards the end, what I would like to say, I think basically in Malaysia, there are already a lot of public awareness. I think Dr. Adi have already highlighted in the morning. And I think for the way forward, I think basically what I would like to say, I think while, as what that's mentioned by Dr. Tan, while we don't have any commercial oil palm, commercial GM planting yet, but definitely there's a robust regulatory framework ready, and it's just waiting for any crop to be planted. At the same time, I think it's a system allowing for GM to come to the country properly. And also I think we can see now more and more people are involved with genome editing, and I think we hope that one fine day we will have more of this genome edited crop to be cultivated in Malaysia. And of course, I think the most important with the biosafety regulation that we have, we need to balance between the scientific innovation as well as the public concern and the environmental protection. So with that, I think I would like to thank all of you for attention.
Thank you, Dr. Pavit. For again, it's within the time frame I've given, and probably I did not mention about the title earlier on, right? So it's a preparedness of the GMO food innovation and safety in Malaysia. So there's a lot of things that have been mentioned, and more focusing on the palm oil industries just now. So again, is one of the plants or economics generated in Malaysia for that. Right, last and not least, Dr. Masamai. And for this, as she goes to the rostrum, the presentation here will be on your right to know genetic modified food safety and public trust in Asians. And as of a short resume, he has his doctorate in food science and human nutrition from Washington University. And he has joined FAO, or Food Agriculture Organizations, Rome, since 2006. And last and not least, of course, he is considered an expert about issues relating to food, especially in Asia, as well as at global stage. So I pass it to you now. Thank you, Dr. Masamai.
Thank you very much, Director General, for the very nice introduction, and hello to the fellow panelists. And then before I forget, that I want to thank the organizers for having me here, that it is my honor to be here and then share my story here. I was tasked today, that I have been tasked to talk about this public engagement. So this is a topic that I really love talking with people and then thinking about the way forward. So I am very happy to share my thoughts, and then hopefully that I can get your thinking process to inspire my forward looking work on this topic. Before I get into the topic, that this is sometimes a joke that we are probably mostly scientists here, yes, or government officials, maybe stakeholders, developers. So we have basic understanding of science, the natural science, correct? And then some people working very specifically on certain scientific issues, some people more on the oversight of the work, but then at the same time that I'm sure that every single one of us has faced a situation that we have to explain about what we do to somebody who has no clue about science, right? So how do you do that? How do you start? How do you strategize that? How do I explain what I do to somebody like my grandmother or somebody who doesn't have the basis? And then this is about the communication, is that correct? I mean, and that's what we think about. And then joke is, if I speak very slowly of the science, do people understand better? Well, not really, actually. I mean, science is not about the pace of the talk. Then what is it? That how do we achieve, the understanding of somebody who doesn't have a basis of the understanding of what we do? So this is a huge challenge, that it is not easy. So that's what I wanted to highlight. And then my way is start with something people would possibly understand. So that is the idea. So that's first slide. So I have a few questions for you. Do you think the world is facing rapid population growth? Do you think? Can I see the hands? How many people think that we are really, like, a population is growing so fast? Only few? Seriously? FAO estimated a decade back that by 2050 we will reach the 9 billion. But then we are already 9 billion in 2025. So I think that this is a growth. And then do you think we will have more climate-related challenges? Yes, we do. And then how many of us think that this extreme weather is really impacting us? Yes. And then how about impacting agriculture? Yes. And then how many people think that the growth of the population and then this kind of climate change they're possibly creating the food insecurity situation in the future? The big hand, thank you. So I think this is why that the United Nations is really thinking about that this is not to scare people off, but then we have to anticipate whatever that the issue may come to us. So our consideration is that there will be a time that we may have, not enough food for everybody, not enough animal protein for everybody, not enough good nutrients for everybody. So this is coming, right? And then how do we address that? We just work very hard to make more food? That's one way, right? And then lots of people think that we like, of course, that the conventional way that we have been having a grandfather, great-great-grandfather making food for us, and then, grandmother cooking for us, and then making food available for us. If we continue doing this, we may not be able to address these new problems. So that's why that we are saying that innovation and technology is no longer an option. The innovation and technology are something that we have to look into. And then there will be no single silver bullet. It will be a combination of different options and solutions putting together, and then we have to really tailor all those solutions into the different contexts. So this is the problem statement I usually use to talk to people. And then what could be acceptable, what is not acceptable is very much subjective matter. So it's not something that somebody can push onto somebody. Eventually, that each one of us will have a right to know, right to think, and then right to decide. So the government, scientists, stakeholders, the producers, farmers, everybody come together to work together to give options for the solution. So this is the idea when I talk about GMOs or biotechnology, gene editing, and so forth. So hopefully that will give you some sort of thinking idea for communication. Now, about ASEAN, that I see lots of potentials, don't you? I mean, the ASEAN is leading in agriculture, leading in the lots of regulatory establishment, enabling the environment. So I don't see too many problems or challenges at this moment. But then, of course, ASEAN itself is a group of different countries, so different issues exist, different regulatory frameworks exist. And then people talk about harmonization. But then harmonization is a far goal, right? So we can actually align with the different contexts, different the methods together. So I think that the huge potential, I really see opportunities in ASEAN. And then the trust challenge. I always talk about trust, of course, because in communication, it is an essential element. How do we build trust of the consumers? And then now that a lot of people are talking about labeling, right to know. And of course that we have a right to know what we eat, correct? We want to know. But then we have a labeling, and then what information do we want to get from the labeling? What is essential? So I am coming from the food safety, so I always think about safety-related information is essential. So for example, allergy-related information, this is very critical. And then also the nutrient, nutrition composition is important. And some people may argue that point of origin, that where this is produced, where this is packaged, it's important. And then some people say like, oh, this is important, or what kind of pesticides, or what kind of chemicals used. And then this is the point, like things become a little bit unsure, no? Do we really know that what kind of pesticides have been applied or where it is applied? So I think that there is a limited amount of information we can actually get in the end. So we have to prioritize what information we want to have. And then currently GMO is a target of the labeling, mandatory labeling or voluntary labeling topic. And then what do you think? Is this essential information or non-essential information? This is another thing that we have to think about, because mutagenesis that the professor talked about earlier, we don't know that there is no information on the labeling, or no? So I think that this is the information that we have to think about, where we align our ASEAN-related information sharing, where we can really build the trust, and then how we can provide this information that consumers really want. So this could be a very good discussion point for the group like ASEAN. And some people mentioned FAO GM Foods platform. This is the platform to share the results of the food safety assessment. It's not about authorization results. It is about the food safety assessment. So basically anyone, it is publicly available, anyone can go onto the database and then look for the certain GM events and then look at each country's the food safety assessment results. So you can see the detail of the food safety assessment results, so that other countries can look at, for example, Malaysia is actually leading together with the Philippines and Thailand and Singapore, and then some Indonesia too. The assessment results can be very, very informative, because the countries who received the application, they can look at other countries' safety assessment results to understand what key elements, what the safety considerations that other countries have looked at. And then this is working very well. And then we have about 2,200 events already shared on the GM Foods platform. And then interesting thing is, no matter what country this safety assessment is coming from, no matter it's EU, UK, Malaysia,
Indonesia, Japan, whoever, the same event, the results of the safety assessment is substantially the same. So it's very interesting that no matter how the political standpoints are different, when we look at the science, if we look at the food safety assessment, eventually the results are the same. And then we are demonstrating in the database that we are doing the best that we can do with the collaboration of different countries. And then I see this kind of meeting is excellent. I really like the initiative of the Malaysian and also the ASEAN that this is very important, that you don't notice on the one-day meeting right after that you don't see the effect, but then in the long run that this is one of the big efforts that will pay off and then it will bloom. So I really recommend lots of countries that do open the dialogues, talk about it, and then give the opportunity for people to have a say. Then this will build trust very much. And then, of course, that the communication with empathy, always, that we have to be a very good listener. So I try my best to listen to whatever the concerns the people may have. And the platform has quite few active members, 84% of the Codex members actively sharing, and then 51 countries, this is including the EU countries too, sharing the assessment. So if you have never seen the FAO GM Foods platform, I recommend. And yeah, like I said, Malaysia is one of the leader board the country, and then it is excellent to see all the results of the food safety assessment. And FAO is looking into these new food production systems, not only about GMO, but then of course gene editing, cell-based food production, precision fermentation, and then all are somewhat connected and related because precision fermentation, most of the applications use the GMM. So I think that the microorganism is becoming a very hot topic there, and then people are really looking into the way to assure the safety of it, although the final products won't have this GMM in the end, in theory. So it's very interesting. Therefore, that FAO has this global regulatory working group to talk about this issue very regularly. So it's a very interesting group of people, and Singapore actually leading these efforts, and then I think that this is very much something the innovative and then also the exciting area to look into. And we do have new methodologies for food safety assessment too, that we have been hearing about these genomics based technologies to be used for the safety assessment. And then now the whole genome sequencing and then also the metagenomics, those are the key tools to understand the genomes, right? And then we have to understand lots of things that where this gene editing is happening, where is the insertion point, or what happens, and then what is expressed, what is not expressed. Those methodologies are developing. And then also that somebody mentioned this indoor farming, the vertical farming efforts, that it is also another interesting area, combination of the novel food production and then also the new way of assuring the food security. So these are the things that we are looking into as an FAO. And then it is very important that we make the information available to the public, and then we keep talking about it so that the information is in a way that consistent. We are not heavily talking about one single topic, but then rather we are looking at these are the new production methods, these are the new methods of analysis, and that we normalize the hazards, because hazards exist. Hazards exist in every single thing. So every day that we have hazards, we take the risk analysis and we make a decision. So I think that this is a very important process to communicate with the consumers. And these are the questions I think that I'm going to let Director General to ask those questions, but then I would put into the 4 categories that we are talking about science, but then we need to have a very good balance with the social acceptance, and then also how we can ensure the transparency in information provision, how do we build the trust, and then how people make the meaningful choices. I think these are the important questions that we have to continue thinking. And my 3 takeaway message from here is that we do have to recognize the potential of the biotechnologies, not only GMOs, but in various different modern biotechnology. They could be a part of the solutions to the problems that I mentioned earlier. And then, but at the same time, we need to ensure the access to these technologies by low and middle income countries, not only advanced countries, but then we have to see that if this is available for everybody, the consumers, farmers, everybody. And then at the same time, that not because I am a food safety officer, but then always safety comes first, because that is the thing that the people concerned about the most. So with that, I close my presentation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Masamai, for a presentation on your right to know genetic modification, or GM, food safety, and public trust. So when it comes to trust, it's a very, very subjective, and or probably what I would say is a personal to the individual, to the society, even to a nation in that particular, or regional area. So again, let's give another round of applause for 3 of the panelists as they have presented on the topics of with great technology come great responsibility, which is from the farm all the way to our plates, in short, from the food. And that's what been addressed by Dr. Masamai about food safety. Again, I have to revert back to what been presented by Dr. Siang on grain and seed, and we have seen a lot of empirical data, and that reflects when we apply this AI or predictive analytics about where it is heading to. It's not going to have a regression, but definitely it's going moving forward. And forward meaning to say we have to face the reality about how best to address. Address means balancing between what will be the food to be put on the table, and with the growth of this human, and that will come with a food question of food security. Definitely, we have to address it now rather than later. Or in fact, we're still denying there is an existence about something that we need to address using innovation and technology, balancing it with food safety. So that probably kickstart our discussion or dialogue right now. I pass it to the floor. Before passing to the floor, anybody from the floor would like to have a say? If not, I shall start with myself first. All right. Yeah, so you can refine the question, but on my part, panelists, it's interesting to know in this discussion, dialogue about from farm to food. And of course, Dr. Pavit, you mentioned about in the context of Malaysia, palm oil, the advancement of technology, and how we can address the issue about space. Malaysia can't be growing bigger than what we are now, but what we can innovate, definitely in terms of yield per acre, and that is something that we can leverage on genetically modified or gene editings and whatnot later on. Right, talking about technology, AI and whatnot predictive, Dr. Masami mentioned that. Probably I will put that elements of AI into Dr. Siang, how do you see the predictive analytic of this grain, whether the conventional is a way to go, but it doesn't sound like that. But definitely, what will be the projection of the 5 or 10 years? How best we can leverage on AI in increasing, even to inform the public and the industry player, even public at large, is the way to go with this technology. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you, DG. Very interesting question. And let me phrase this answer into 3 components. First is on the research itself, on the AI implementation. Today, if I want to do a whole genome sequence in the US, it's about $3,000 to $4,000, and you get very high coverage. And together with the informatics behind it, with all the AI, the predictive model will be much more faster. And I just came up from China last week, and China has put a lot of GPUs into modeling, even doing risk assessment in silico trials for those modeling. Early days we do for allergenicity, etc. Right now, it's all bioinformatics driven. So the time to short from R&D to get a potential molecule and a potential change in the, what you call a mutation, is going to be very fast. You look at the US company, oh my God, it just left my mind. They are doing one plant, how was it ready? The DNA company that we were in US, and anyway, it comes to my mind. Anyway, they are doing one single plant, sorry, it's late in the afternoon. One single plant, they have 10, 15 edits in a single plant to change its different qualities and taste and sweetness, height, and etc. So that will become much more faster to get to the marketplace, and more investment are going to reshape. But the fundamental question goes back to what Dr. Masami says, and also how do we convince the political space, number one, to be able to shape and change the regulation to enable this R&D to go on and to bring products into the market. That is our biggest worry. The trust with society can be managed with a lot of groundwork and what they call awareness, but the trick piece is today social media is being what you call militarized in that sense. There's a lot of attacks on regulators and etc. when you pass through a regulation. So there needs to be a balance in able to manage the social media as a ground voice, as opposed to very good public consultation that people are really concerned to address the science discussion, as opposed to take out weaponization of social media to attack the regulators and the government for approving certain technology. So I think those are the 3 big pieces, but AI is definitely here to stay. It will express the ability for us to put products into the market with those modeling, and the whole genome sequence is awesome, seriously. The speed of, Dato Parviz did his first all-palm genome, it took us many years, right? And now, 2013. So you're seeing an example here, but today the genome sequencing is very bad. So to me, it's those 3 components, we need to address it differently and also very sensitively. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Chiang. On predicting, applying this AI analytics, right? Can I go back to the floor? Or Dr. Masami, yeah, you.
May I add to that's wonderful categorization of, my take is that this AI use in food safety assessment is significantly changing the landscape of the food safety management and assessment, particularly that we are talking about GMO, like a whole food safety assessment, which is very different from a single substance safety assessment. And then we have been using inconclusively animal feeding studies quite a bit. And then now that we are able to start taking up this in silico predictive model to
of course, that given that we have accumulated good data, but then we might be able to go into this new approach methods, very nice transition, and then still that we have to make a very conscious efforts in making a very good consolidated data, but then we may be able to have some way forward from there. So I am very optimistic about this AI being used as a very strong food safety assessment tool.
Okay, there you go. From the point of food safety and whatever that's been served on the table as we consume the foods, definitely we can't run away now. Is it GMO? If it's so, think on the positive side that it is meant for higher quality as what we projected in the montage to increase the quality, as mentioned, increase the longer shelf life, as well as resistant to pest, disease, and whatnot. So on that note, probably you can share, Dr. Vavid, about what would be some of the challenges when it comes to palm oil, oil palm, in Malaysia context, that we have to continue with this R&D and probably leveraging on gene editing at the moment, or even with these GMO methods, the products or the process. So how would you convince the next 5 or 10 years that Malaysia is able to sustain in terms of producing this palm oil, contributing to our economy? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think the first and foremost that we need to know that I think why there's so much of question and trust issue in terms of to consume or not to consume GMO. Okay? If I tell you that there is a GMO that you can buy from the supermarket, is there actually, that you consume it. Very nice, tasty. The good thing is that once you consume it, it reduces your belly fat, enhance your muscle. You can get 6-pack, maybe even 8-pack. Will you consume it? Will you consume it? Yeah, there's a benefit for you. You will go for it. I can tell you, those NGOs that go against GMO, they'll be the first to go and queue, like where people are queuing to buy iPhone. Those people you can see all, they will remove their t-shirt with no GM, whatnot. They will wear whatever t-shirt they want. They go and queue and buy those products. The benefit is to them. But why are they questioning GM? Because the benefit currently is only to the producer. You produce GM that are tolerant to insect, tolerant to herbicide. It's for the producer to produce them that make it resistant to certain pests or make it, to the herbicide. So that means they can grow happily and they can increase the yield and the benefit goes to the producer. They can reduce the usage of herbicide and whatnot. So then they can produce more. It's good for what we call, the food security. You know, you have less pests and whatnot. So the advantage goes to the producer. But at the end of the day, indirectly, it still goes back to the consumer because you can produce more and you can also help to reduce the food security. And again, when people are talking about GM crop, I was in state a few years ago. There was this NGO came and talked to me in one of the conference. He said, what do you think about the GMO crop or GMO food? I told them, that is the safest food in the world. You tell me any food that you consume besides GMO that have to go to the thorough process of you look at the sequence where, I mean, the insertion site, you look at the sequence, you study all the what they call the allergenicity, whether the sequence you put in can produce any allergen and whatnot, and then you do testing on this animal, that animal, PT, all these guinea pig have to be tested eating all this, all this whatever GM, they happily survive, and at the end of the day, we pass and then we start commercializing it, people are consuming it. Whereas those products that may have gone through certain other technology like radiation and whatnot, you don't know what is the final product, but nobody cares. We just consume it happily, you know? So I'm just going to share with you some of this scenario. I mean, when we're talking about GM, we have to look at the whole wholesome, and also the what you call the behind. I mean, what is the story behind it? I mean, you have to go through all this process, whereas other food has not gone through that. So that's why I think when the regulators, we approve the GMO, we have looked at all this consideration. Okay, back to your question just now about you talking about what we are doing in terms of GM, oil palm and whatnot. I mean, of course, as I mentioned, that means if there is a benefit to the consumer, people will come and consume it. So for oil palm, because we know that oil palm is the highest productivity in terms of oil crop. You compare to any other crop, I showed the graph just now, what we are producing 5 to 8 times more oil from per hectare of land when you compare to the other oil crops, soybean, rapeseed, sunflower oil, and so on. So that is the advantage. That means if we can genetically modify oil palm and produce a product, then the advantage is that we can produce the same product at a higher quantity. Not only that, but the advantage of oil palm is that other crop, you plant soybean, you plant corn, you plant rapeseed. After a few months, you have to replant and replant and replant. All your carbon, I mean your what they call they mean all your basically your carbon footprint, water footprint, everything. And then when you replant, that's the time your land is bare, open. Okay? Then you have to start putting fertilizer, herbicide and whatnot. Oil palm, the moment you plant them, of course you take 3 years when they start fruiting. But once they start fruiting, they will happily start and producing fruit for you at least for another 25 years. So once you produce that, they will produce in a large quantity, and it will be there for 25 years before you go and do another replanting. Of course, you can go 30 years, 40 years, you can. But the thing why we stop at 25, because it's too tall already for you to harvest. Of course, that means, so that is the case of oil palm. That means, that's why, I mean, even though people were saying, you know, with all the no GMO and whatnot, we can see, but still we can see a lot of GMO product in the world, in the market. So for oil palm, we've been continue doing all this, our effort, not really on the commodity side. That's why we are not working on herbicide tolerant and whatever. We are working more for specifically or what we call niche produce like increasing carotene, increasing lycopene. Lycopene is a very important what we call carotenoid or antioxidant. And then we want to produce palmitoleic acid, ricinoleic acid, and certain products that are niche. That means eventually we can produce niche product which is very healthy, which is very good for health. When you produce in a bulk quantity and continuously, we can bring down the price because of the quantity. Currently, all these niche products, they are produced in a very small quantity. That's why the price is very high. So that is advantage when that come. I mean, and also when we produce this, this will be produced in a niche plantation, not really openly, because people are still scared of GM and whatnot. So we are looking at that side. I mean, but whatever it is, there's no GM or commercial GM oil palm in any part of the world. So these are still whatever we do in the screen out. But eventually, when once we have, or once we are ready, of course now we are all moving from normal transformation into what we call genome editing. So once we are ready, then I think the advantage is that whatever the new product or the niche product that we are producing, we will be able to produce in a higher quantity and of course continuously. So that's where the advantage for our product. And of course, we are not really touching on the commodity like herbicide tolerant and whatnot. And I think maybe I stop at that. Thank you.
Right, thank you once more. Dr. Fadbit, I think we have gone one full round of this dialogue section with our panels. Then I have to pass the mic to the floor. Am I seeing, if just now Dr. Masame is asking for a show of hands? So now I'm asking anybody who would like to stand up. Now that we're already at the last lap. Okay, Dr. Masame.
I have a question to
Masame,
the
sorry.
fellow panelists and then also the Director General, if it is okay. The doctor talked about this benefit communication and then particularly social benefit. What is the benefit for the consumers? Who should be communicating this? And how? What do you think that who should be the greatest effective communicator to talk about the benefits?
Yep.
I think definitely the person who going to convey and to highlight about the benefit shouldn't come from the producer. It's matter of trust, conflict of interest. I give you example. I mentioned at the beginning when we first in 2010. When the board was established, and our first task basically, me as a chairman, is to approve the genetically modified, the release of the GM mosquito. Okay? Of course, that time I learned a lot about mosquito. And we did the trial. Our approach was, when we approve, before we can do the trial, what we did was, we called for a press conference at the ministry, at our biosafety department. I was there as a chair, and of course the DG at that time, Mr. Lechumanan, was there, and few others, our GMAT members. Of course, we have the applicant from the institute there as well. And we, as the regulators who evaluated the GM mosquito, we explained to the media, to the public, what is all about, what is the advantage, and why, if this experiment, when we do eventually, if we release the mosquito, which eventually can reduce the way how it works, I'm not going to display, I'm sure Dr. Adi might have explained in the morning. So if you release the mosquito, you will be able to release the Aedes aegypti population, which will be good for the people. But of course, in order for us to do that, because people are thinking we might be releasing a monster or something like that, so we as a scientific community, as the regulator, we explain to the public how it will work. We got a lot of coverage in the media. And also, for us as a regulator and at the board level, we explain and how it will be done. Of course, when we did it, of course, in a different way, but it was taken as positively. I don't see any cry in the media or people, trying to protest here and there. Of course, when the trial was done, the first trial was done in an area where there's no non-populated, in an area not very far, somewhere there's a jungle site there, a few kilometers away from residential area. We realized during our first attempt there were some people following because maybe the approach was different. So they know exactly that certain agency involved is going to involve in the release, and we realized there were some suspicious cars following us. So we decided to divert and then cancel the release, and it was done in a different day, in a different way. We used different cars and whatnot, so eventually they didn't realize. But definitely I can say, in terms of when we announced that we're going to do the release of the GM mosquito, we didn't see a big protest, we didn't see anything that people get worried, because the regulators who have no interest, but have looked at the safety aspect, we announced that this will be carried out. So people will take it more positively because we are the parties who have no interest. If the organization who going to release, make the announcement, I think the situation will be different. So that's why I think people have more trust at the regulators. So that means we need to make sure that when we release that, it must be a party that can be trusted. And of course, even though we don't have any protests, but still we can see the NGOs are there try to sabotage But we managed to overcome that as well. But that's about it. But basically, I think for me, I just believe that, the regulators or maybe the right authorities who have no public, what we call direct interest, should be the one who should be informing about the GM. Thank you.
Thank you. So I forgot the name of the company. It's called Pairwise, based in the US. They are the leaders in the genome editing. So coming back to your question, Doctor, I will first go, globally there is an annual report of a trust report. They range from politicians to researchers, etc. Different countries have different trust model. All right, so we will, depending on where we are, which country we'll talk to, we'll look at that. But fundamentally, it's the medical sector is a trusted party. The regulators that is what you call assessing it is a trusted party to go off. But then going back is we need to find certain people that is really prominent in the marketplace, and then that we can trust to convey the message and provide the science background as the first ground. So selectively, it's not every country. Dr. Parvis is a good example, but from country to country, we will rely on different stakeholders that has the influence and then provide that clarity. And again, Dr. Masami said, what message do you communicate in a non-scientific way to make the party, the general public, to be able to appreciate? The moment you tell them, oh, I do SDN1, I delete this, that's the end of the story already. And then what benefit does it promote? The benefit needs to translate also to a environmental cost, for example, that farmers are saving and supporting you on a sustainability background. Because everybody, especially the new generation, what is my sustainability, my environmental cost? And that also resonates that we are supporting you indirectly to protect your future in terms of whether it's soil conservation, water conservation, and having a better sustainability environment for your crop. So there are different messages, but fundamentally we need to find a different way to communicate through different stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Siang. Thank you, Dr. Masami. I guess as though as I have my assistant moderator for the panelists just now. All right, thank you anyway. Rightly spot on. No taker, then I guess I'm going to go for just a few more minutes. Okay, right from the floor, Dr. Hefni.
Thank you. Just a question to Dr. Masami. As from the perspective of FAO, in order to get the public to get right to know, is there any threshold or any ceiling that you think that the public already got the message? How many information that we need to give in order to get?
Got it. Thank you very much. That's a very good question, right? Because in the end, that I think that this is my personal, feeling. But then, in the end, when I ask people that how much do you want to know, that is my question, and then almost everybody says that as much as I can. So this is the like a ceilingless limit, basically, that the information. But nobody has enough time even to read FAO 50 pages of documents. So how do we compare and then also address this gap that, okay, we want to provide the references and resources to everybody, but then in the end that the efforts are not being paid because people don't read those kind of documents. So my consideration at this moment is that the threshold does not exist. It's a clear line, but then at the same time that as an effort from the global perspectives that we have to prepare this information in a different formats. So this good reference document, 150 pages or be it, but then we have to create some sort of very concise version, lay person's language version, animation, video, infographics, different formats, and then it seems like each one finds a particular audience to learn about the topic of food safety. So this is how we are trying very hard to see that how to tailor to the different audience groups. I hope that answers your question.
I would like to add, if I have 1 minute,
Yep, 1 minute more. Just 1 minute.
Okay. So going back to your question is, where is the limit? There's no clear line. If you today you put on Facebook right now, should I go for lunch now? Probably you'll never eat for the next few days because you get different answers. So it goes back to the fundamental with X 100 countries have already done the access for, let's get MON 810. Everybody comes to the same result. So it gives you that scientific fundamental stability that the global technical experts from all countries are sovereign scientists have given that data. So that gives you your first stability, right? Then you ask the next question, is everybody the same? And then you look at it, what is the potential risk for my country if I were to release it? That is then your environmental local scenario. So those are protocol, but to me is if the global community has already stabilized that this is the fact for the last 25 years, there shouldn't be any abrupt condition. The second piece is we are all Cartagena Protocol people. There's liability and redress for biodiversity and etc. for contamination. It's all in place, and there's zero case. So you shouldn't take it extreme precautionary, but based on what is relevant. Okay, 18 people die in car accident every day in Malaysia. 45 people out of 100,000 die from food poisoning in Malaysia. Jalan tak jalan, makan tak makan. So there needs to be a balance in science, balance in how the technology is being deployed, and what are the care processes that is being put in place. Thank you. Sorry, 1 minute.
Okay, right. So I'm going to, there's no other question from the floor. I think I shall stop it, end this session. But before ending it, definitely as a takeaway, okay, I see one more hand there. That would be the last question from the floor. Yes, the gentleman.
Hi, my name is Siva. I have a question for the panelists, right? We're talking about GMO, whether it's safe or not, whether it's consumable or not. So let's say we all agree to a sentence that it's consumable, it's okay, safe, and it's going to pass. But my question would be, who would be responsible if a GMO causes unintended consequences? Whether the scientists who vouch for it, whether it's going to be the company or the regulator. We see a lot of, even in the cases of, there are quite a lot of drugs that's gone through clinical trials being called back due to certain, cases that it has. And also in the cases of plastic pollution, let's say, like, it's not a parallel analogy, but we're going to consider that nobody's taking responsibility when it comes to plastic pollution, whether the producer, company, or, the scientists who vouch for it. But in this cases, who do you think to take responsibility when it comes to unintended consequences? Thank you.
So thank you very much for your question. So he has gone through all the science, and up to date, 25 years, there's zero case that relates to GMO, number one. Number two, the fundamental potential things like allergenicity is all removed on the first stage of the R&D. It has never gone into a marketplace. So a lot of barriers, the science barriers, have been put in place to ensure that that safety protocol is fully adhered. So number one. Number two, when you talk about environmental or unintended, as I mentioned, Kyoto-Nagoya Protocol provides for biodiversity contamination. The country is able to file a case into CBD to get a claim. So that environmental protocol is all put in place. And as what you call all medication, like you said, there is always a risk profile. That's where the science comes in. You do the assessment, you do the monitoring, and you look at other countries, whether it's Philippines, there's post-event monitoring. We look at resistance management. That is why we continue to update all the gene sets to make sure that we manage that resistance that doesn't fall in and farmer doesn't, their crops doesn't fail. So a lot of mechanism is put in place to assure both at the environmental level, community level, and also the regulator level. We don't want the regulators to face a different question why this was not unknown. So a lot of modeling has also been done, and AI is where the next step, as we, even before the molecule gets into a wet lab space, a lot of things are being tested already. So a lot of things are put in place. Thank you.
So for the food safety assessment for the pre-marketing assessment requirement, that there is a section for applicants to look into the unintended consequences and an effect. So this is a given in terms of the responsibility for the producers to look into it. But then, of course, that the government is also responsible to validate this dossier. So basically, that there are double lines. But then another responsibility I can really think about is the communication needs, because nothing is 100% safe. Nothing is. So this is something that we have to keep normalizing, that look that this is what we can do maximum, and then this is not always 100% or 0% risk or anything like that. And then I think it is a responsibility of the consumer side to understand the science behind it.
Just very quickly, I think the difference between pharma and GM, I think pharma, because once you get whatever approval from whichever authority, then you start going to other countries. Not every country, when they import, they will do the same regulation, testing. But in terms of GM, it's different. Every country that would like to allow them to come in, they will do the testing. And so far, as Dr. Tan mentioned, since I think the first GM was produced in 1983, until today, there's no event, alhamdulillah. So far we can say, fingers crossed, I think so far there's no. And I think, of course, if there is any, now of course the responsibility go back to the producer. They are the one who are producing it, then they have to automatically stop, because other people are just planting it. And most of them, they have to go back and buy from the producer. So the producer will be responsible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's give another big round of applause for our panels, because that will come to the end of our dialogue section there. So thank you, Dr. Siang, Dr. Favid, and Dr. Masami. And we hope that this will bring us to another event in future, because this is just a start of something that we desire to have a more cohesive and also collaboration within the ASEAN region. And what more to say at the level of global, with the industry player as well, the publics, and the NGOs with that. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roni, for moderating the session. And of course, thank you to our guest speakers. We would like to invite them back to their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, just 2 more items on our itinerary today. And before we proceed with the next one, allow me to invite our guest speakers back to their seat, and our DG also to return to his seat. Just give a couple of seconds for our stage crew to prep the stage. As coming up next, we are going to extend a special thank you to each and every one of our guest speakers. Special tribute, thank you for their generosity and their commitment in preparing, compiling all this information. That's going to be it's going to be very useful and will be widely used by our industry players and everyone in this field. All right, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. As we have mentioned just before this, it is time for us to extend our appreciation to all our esteemed presenters and panelists for their contribution. So throughout the sessions, they have generously shared their knowledge, insights, and expertise, enriching our understanding of biosafety and the importance of it to the world. So with that, I would like to invite our DG. It will be your last time on stage, sir, for now. We would like to invite Mr. Lornie Engong, DG of Biosafety, to accompany Yang Berbahagia, Dr. Ching Tu Kim, the Secretary General of NRES, to the stage for us to present some mementos to our esteemed panelists. All right, with that, it is with great honor for me to invite Dr. Tri Joko Santoso from Indonesia. Bapak Joko handled so many questions today, so did all of our panelists. And once you've received your memento, please remain on stage and take a step to the back while we wait for the other speakers to join you on stage, Dr. Tri Joko. And next, please welcome Dr. Pichaporn Wanitikul from Thailand. And of course, our greatest salamat, Miss Darlene Joyciana from the Philippines. Thank you very much, Miss Darlene, for your participation and commitment to Biosymposium 2025. And it was with great pleasure for us to invite Emeritus Professor Jim Dunwell from United Kingdom. Thank you, sir, once again for being a part of Biosafety Symposium 2025. And the young chap from the OG gang, Dr. Tan Siang Hee from Crop Life. And next, yang berbahagia, Datuk Dr. Ahmad Parvez Haji Ghulam Kadir. And please welcome Dr. Masama Takeuchi from the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, FAO. And representing our host country, Dr. Adiratna Matripin. And of course, a special thank you to Dr. Hong Yan as well, who had to leave earlier for his prior engagements. Dr. Adiratna opened our session today with her presentation. If we can have all our panel speakers take a step forward next to our Secretary General and our DG of Biosafety to have a group photo. Thank you again for your commitment and your generosity in sharing all this information here at Biosafety Symposium 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them the loudest, warmest round of applause. I'm just waiting for the cue from the cameraman before I can release our speakers. Okay, we would like to invite the speakers back to your seat and Mr. Lorny also back to your seat. Yang berbahagia Datuk Doktor, our Secretary General of NRES, we would like to invite you to the rostrum. I am sure everyone would love to hear what your thoughts are now that Biosafety Symposium 2025 has gone on so well today, inaugural, and I'm sure a lot of ideas will be coming from you as well, having observed all the discussions that's been happening today. Datuk Doktor, silakan.
Thank you. I will make a short speech. The time is already 5:20. Most of you are already thinking of going home. Let me first thanking all of you, the panelists, the sponsors, the DG of Safety Department, for putting all the efforts, having all of you coming here today to share, to learn, to educate about biosafety. And I would like to say that I've learned a lot as well, right? I learned about biosafety, and to some extent, I'm convinced that we need to balance between biosafety and the safety part of it, right? And I'm convinced that we have to improve our communications to inform, to educate, to advocate to the publics about this issue. And I'm learned, you are in this hall, I was informed that close to 500 participants are also convinced that we need to take a further steps, more rigorous steps in order to promote this sector in the country. And we are at the ministry, we will support fully the Department of Biosafety in terms of strengthening our regulations. They need to have a more skill sets to enforce the Act 678 more effectively. And moving forward, what we would like to do is that this symposium is only a baby step we have taken to a more insightful, meaningful discussion ahead. We are thinking of convincing another sessions 2 years from now. And I would like to welcome all of you back to the symposiums. And I've seen there are a lot of synergy today's event, right? If I were to open until 6 p.m., most of them will be stay put in this room
to contribute to these discussions. And again, as we move forward toward the COP30 in Belém this year, we would like to link biosafety to the climate change environment, climate change perspective. And just to update is a few things that in the pipeline that we are going to do in the ministry. We are going to amend the Act 678 to give more power to the biosafety department as the guardian of the biosafety in the country. We are going to ensure the people like Mr. Tan, you and I that consume GM food almost every day, that rest assured we will make sure that your safety is protected. And in order to do that, we need to have effective communication skills and tools. Just so Dr. Basar, you talk about communication, that is very close to my heart. Being a communication student, right? We have to go back to the basic communication model, SMCR. We have to have the right sender. We have to curate the messages, selecting the right channels, and most importantly, the messenger that is going to receive your message. But along the line, we take note of the noise that is going to distort your message. That's an important thing. Back to climate change. We are going to pass the climate change bill very soon. And as much as we acknowledge we are part of the problems, we are the one that pollute the environment. And the time for us to do some paying back effort in order for us to safeguard the climate. One thing that we have done so far, right, that something that we are so proud of, is the 100 million trees planting initiative. You know, tree as a good carbon sink. So far, we have achieved that goal a year ahead of the plan. 2025, but this year we have achieved that goal already. And this is important to read the message is that we have only one planet to live in. No other planet, planet A. And on that note, I would like to urge all of you to play your small role in making sure that when you walk out from this room, you have the message that all parties, whether people like Mr. Tan, the producers, the importers, people like Dr. Ismail from the FAO, our professor from the UK, me as policymakers, we should play the role in making sure that our stakeholders, the people on the ground, the masses, the interests are being taken care of. That's the important thing. On the other part, I take point that we are also listen to the people on the negative part of the GM itself, right? That's why striking the balance is between promoting the industry and the need to look into the negative perception of GM is also so important. So once again, I would like to again thanks all of you who have been here from the 8 in the morning until this moment. A safe journey home for our colleagues from abroad. If you have time, please take some time to explore Kuala Lumpur. And for those who love our Musang King, right? And this is one thing I would like to put forward to you. Through this GM technology, it's not possible one day we could plant Musang King durian in Europe. I'm not sure whether it is possible or not. With that, once again, thank you so much. And hope to see you in 2027. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia, Dr. Ching Tu Kim, Secretary General of NRES. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we come to a close. Biosafety Symposium 2025, we would like to thank everyone once again. Can I have all the members, all the crew and staff of Department of Biosafety and NRES to stand up? Can I have all the staff of biosafety and the liaison officers, NRES staff to stand up and wave to everyone. These are the people who have worked tirelessly for weeks and months to make today a success. To all our speakers, we hope you've had a great time, and don't forget to scan your QR for you to complete your participation certificate. And once again, congratulations to NRES and Department of Biosafety. We hope you have a safe travel back home. Thank you again to all foreign delegates. Until we meet again in the next symposium, have a good evening, everyone. Salam Malaysia Madani.
Malaysia Madani, rakyat disantuni, timur, barat, selatan dan utara. Malaysia Madani, hai bersatu hati, kita semua sama Malaysia.
Satu hati.